The December blizzard struck the Colorado Territory with the fury of a wounded beast, transforming the landscape into a white hellscape where the line between earth and sky disappeared entirely. Through this maelstrom, 3 figures struggled forward, a woman and 2 small boys, their forms barely visible against the driving snow that seemed determined to erase them from existence. Eleanor Whitman pulled her twins closer, feeling 6-year-old Henry's fevered body burning against her side, while William clutched her other hand with desperate strength. They had been walking for 3 hours since abandoning their broken-down wagon, and she knew, with the terrible clarity that comes to mothers in crisis, that they wouldn't last another hour in this storm. "Mama, I can't see anything." William's voice barely carried over the howling wind. "Just hold on to me, sweetheart. We're going to find shelter soon." The lie came easily to her lips. Better to die with hope than surrender to despair. Through the white curtain of snow, a dark shape materialized a fence post, then another. Her heart leaped. A fence meant property, property meant buildings. Buildings meant the possibility of survival. She followed the fence line with her free hand, ice crystals forming on her worn gloves, until she felt the solid presence of a gate. Beyond it, barely visible, stood the outline of a substantial ranch house, its windows dark as empty eye sockets. No smoke rose from the chimney. Eleanor's hope faltered, but she pushed through the gate anyway. An abandoned house was better than no shelter at all. She pounded on the heavy oak door with her last reserves of strength. "Please, is anyone there? My children, we need help." Silence answered her, broken only by the wind's relentless shrieking. She tried the door handle, surprised when it turned easily in her hand. Unlocked. That should have been her first warning. The interior was dark, but blessedly warm. Someone had banked the fire in the great stone fireplace recently. Eleanor guided her boys inside, their frozen bodies beginning to shiver violently as the warmth hit them. That's when she saw him. Marcus Sullivan sat in a high-backed leather chair facing the dying fire, so still he might have been carved from stone. On the table beside him lay 3 items arranged with deliberate precision: a photograph of a woman and young girl, a half-empty bottle of laudanum, and a Colt .45 revolver, its metal gleaming dully in the firelight. Eleanor's breath caught. She recognized the tableau for what it was: a man preparing for his final act. But before she could speak, Henry collapsed beside her, his fevered body finally giving out. "Henry." She dropped to her knees beside her son, and that's when Marcus moved for the first time, his head turning slowly toward them like a man waking from a dream. "You shouldn't be here." His voice was hollow, disconnected, as if he were speaking from the bottom of a well. "My son is sick. Please." Eleanor looked up at him, and in the firelight, she saw a face that might have been handsome once, but was now carved by grief into something ancient and terrible. "He's burning with fever. Are you a doctor? Is there a doctor nearby?" Marcus stared at them for a long moment, his gray eyes focusing with visible effort. Then something shifted in his expression, a crack in the stone facade. "I was. Once. Then help him, please. I'll do anything." "I can't." He turned back to the fire. "I couldn't save my own daughter. The fever took her 3 months ago along with my wife. Same symptoms. Same helplessness." Eleanor looked at the photograph on the table, understanding flooding through her. The woman in the image had Eleanor's same auburn hair, the child Henry's age. In his grief-stricken mind, seeing them must be like seeing ghosts. "Then you know," she said quietly, lifting Henry's burning body. "You know what it's like to watch a child suffer, but you also know what it's like to have the knowledge to help. My husband died in a mine collapse 6 months ago. These boys are all I have left in the world. If you have any humanity left in you, any memory of what it felt like to love your daughter, please don't let my son die on your floor while you sit there planning your own death." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Marcus's hand moved toward the revolver, then stopped. He looked at Henry's flushed face, at William's terrified eyes, at Eleanor's desperate determination. "Bring him to the kitchen," he said, finally standing with visible effort. "There's more light there." As Eleanor carried Henry following Marcus's unsteady steps, she noticed details that told the story of his decline. Dust on every surface except the chair where he sat. Curtains drawn tight against the world. Empty bottles lined up like soldiers against the wall. This was a house where hope had died, where a man had been slowly following his family into the darkness. Marcus lit several lamps in the kitchen, his movements becoming more assured as muscle memory took over. "Lay him on the table. William, was it? There's a medical bag in the study, third door on the right. Black leather, bring it here." The boy ran off, and Marcus bent over Henry, his fingers finding the pulse at the child's neck, checking his pupils, feeling the heat of his skin. "How long has he been like this?" 2 days. It started as a cough, then the fever came. The landlord evicted us yesterday when I couldn't pay rent. We were heading to Denver when the storm hit." Marcus's hand stilled for a moment. "Evicted, in December, with sick children. Mr. Garrett doesn't concern himself with such details." "Garrett?" Marcus's voice hardened. "Samuel Garrett. You know him. He's my brother-in-law. Was." Marcus's jaw clenched. "He blames me for his sister's death. Says if I'd been a better doctor, I could have saved her." William returned with the medical bag, and Marcus opened it with hands that trembled slightly. Inside, everything was meticulously organized, but covered in a fine layer of dust. He hadn't opened it since his daughter died. "Hold him still," Marcus instructed, preparing a mixture of herbs and medicines with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this countless times before. "This will bring down the fever, but he needs warmth fluids and careful monitoring through the night." As he worked, Eleanor watched something remarkable happen. The hollow man who had been preparing to die was transforming before her eyes, purpose flowing back into his movements, like blood returning to a sleeping limb. He was saving a life instead of ending one, and in that act, something in him was awakening. "There," Marcus said, finally stepping back. "The crisis should break by morning. If it doesn't—" He trailed off, then caught himself. "It will. I'll make sure of it." Eleanor felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Thank you. Thank you for choosing to help us instead of taking the coward's way out." Marcus looked at the kitchen doorway toward the living room where his revolver still waited. "The night's not over yet, Mrs. Whitman. Eleanor Whitman. Mrs. Whitman." He studied her face in the lamplight, seeing his wife's coloring, but a different spirit, stronger perhaps, or maybe just not yet broken by loss. "You and your boys can stay until the storm passes and Henry recovers. After that we'll leave. I promise. We won't impose on your grief any longer than necessary." Marcus almost smiled, a bitter twist of his lips. "My grief. Yes, I suppose that's what this is. Though sometimes it feels more like drowning in slow motion." From the table, Henry stirred, mumbling something about horses. His fever was already beginning to break, responding to the medicine faster than Marcus had expected. The boy would live. This one would live. "He'll need watching tonight," Marcus said. "I'll stay up with him." "We'll take turns," Eleanor countered. "You look like you haven't slept properly in weeks." "Months," he corrected. 3 months, 4 days, and he glanced at the clock on the wall. 16 hours. The precision of his grief was heartbreaking. Eleanor reached out impulsively and touched his hand. "They wouldn't want this for you. Your wife and daughter. They wouldn't want you to follow them into the dark." Marcus pulled his hand away, but gently. "You didn't know them." "No. But I know love when I see it, even when it's turned to poison by loss. And I know that saving my son tonight means something broke through that poison, if only for a moment." Outside, the blizzard raged on, sealing them into this house where death and life were fighting for dominance. In the kitchen, a small boy's breathing grew steadier. In the living room, a revolver waited beside a photograph. And somewhere between those 2 points, 3 broken people and 1 man, considering ending his pain, had been thrown together by a storm that would change all their lives forever. The night was far from over, and morning would bring questions that none of them were ready to answer. But for now, in this moment, they were alive. All of them. And sometimes that's where redemption begins. Not with grand gestures or revelations, but with the simple act of choosing to stay alive for 1 more hour, 1 more minute, 1 more breath. The morning light filtered through the frost-covered windows of the Sullivan Ranch, revealing a world transformed by the blizzard into something pristine and deadly. Eleanor stood at the kitchen window, watching the sun turn the snowfields into diamonds, while her boys still slept upstairs in the guest room, the first real bed they'd had in weeks. Marcus entered quietly, carrying an armload of firewood. He looked different in daylight, younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 35, though grief had carved premature lines around his eyes. His dark hair was unkempt, his clothes expensive, but neglected the uniform of a man who had stopped caring about appearances when he'd lost his reason to care about anything. "Henry's fever broke completely around 4 this morning," he said, setting the wood by the stove. "He'll be weak for a few days, but he'll recover fully." "Thanks to you." Eleanor turned from the window. "I've been thinking about what you said last night, about being a doctor once. Veterinarian, actually. Though out here, the distinction often blurred. I treated as many people as animals. Sarah used to joke that—" He stopped abruptly, his jaw tightening. "Sarah was your wife." Marcus nodded, moving to the stove to prepare coffee with movements that suggested ritual more than desire. "Sarah Catherine Sullivan. We met in Boston when I was completing my studies. She was considered too spirited for proper society, read too many books, spoke her mind too freely, laughed too loudly at dinner parties. Her father was delighted when I offered to take her west." He poured 2 cups, his hand steady, now different from the tremor Eleanor had noticed the night before. "We built this ranch together, every fence post, every stone in the fireplace. She designed the layout of the house while pregnant with Emma, insisting on large windows everywhere because she said children needed sunlight to grow properly. Emma was your daughter. 6 years old, Henry's age." Marcus stared into his coffee. "She had Sarah's red hair, but my stubbornness. Could already ride better than most grown men. We were teaching her to read using veterinary texts because she insisted on learning about the animals. Sarah said we were raising a wild creature who'd never fit into proper society, and she couldn't have been prouder." Eleanor heard the pain threaded through every word, saw how his fingers tightened on the cup when he spoke their names. The fever was it, the scarlet fever that went through the territory. Diphtheria. It took them both in 72 hours. I had all the knowledge, all the medicines, 20 years of experience, and I couldn't save them. They died within hours of each other. Sarah first, then Emma, asking for her mother with her last breath. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Eleanor knew that particular agony, the helplessness of watching someone you love slip away. "My husband Tom was a mining engineer," she said quietly. "Not a miner, he designed the support systems, calculated the safe depths, mapped the veins. He was brilliant with numbers, could see patterns in rock formations that others missed. We met when I was teaching school in Missouri. He courted me with geometric proofs and poetry, an odd combination that somehow worked." She smiled at the memory. "We came west for opportunity. Tom had revolutionary ideas about mine safety techniques that could prevent collapses. The mining companies here promised to implement them, but when it came time to spend the money, they decided his innovations were too expensive. They sent him down to inspect a shaft they'd cut too deep, ignored his warnings about structural weakness. The collapse took him and 12 other men." "How long ago?" 6 months. The company claimed it was an unforeseeable accident, refused to pay death benefits. Said Tom had approved the depth, though I know he never would have. We lost our house in the company town, lost everything. I've been taking in washing, mending, teaching when I could find students, but it wasn't enough. Garrett owned the boarding house where we finally found rooms. When I couldn't make December's rent, he threw you out, knowing you had children, knowing one was sick. Marcus's voice carried a cold anger. That sounds like Samuel. He always was a bastard, even before Sarah died. Tried to convince her not to marry me. Said I was taking her away from civilization to play in the dirt with animals. From upstairs came the sound of movement, the boys waking. Eleanor instinctively started toward the stairs, but Marcus stopped her with a gesture. "Let me check on them. You haven't eaten since you arrived. There's bread in the pantry preserves that Sarah made last." He paused. "They're still good." As his footsteps faded upstairs, Eleanor explored the kitchen more thoroughly. Everything spoke of a woman's careful hand. Abandoned labeled jars of preserves and pickles, a recipe box with cards in elegant handwriting, dish towels embroidered with cheerful flowers now folded away, unused. On the windowsill, a child's art project made from pressed flowers had begun to fade and curl. She heard Marcus's deep voice upstairs, then William's excited chatter and Henry's weaker responses. The sound of life in this house of grief felt both wrong and necessary, like the first green shoots after a wildfire. When Marcus returned with the boys, William was riding on his shoulders, while Henry walked slowly but steadily beside them. The transformation in Marcus was subtle, but unmistakable. His shoulders less rigid, his face softer. "Mr. Marcus has horses, Mama," William announced. "Lots of them. And he said when Henry's better, he'll show us. If your mother approves," Marcus added quickly, setting William down at the table. "Can we stay that long?" "Mama," Henry asked, his voice still raspy but eyes bright with interest. Eleanor looked at Marcus, unsure how to answer. He'd said they could stay until the storm passed, and Henry recovered, but the snow showed no signs of stopping, and Henry would need days to regain his strength. "The storm's likely to last another 2 days at least," Marcus said, reading her uncertainty. "And the roads will be impassable for a week after that. You're welcome to stay until travel is safe." "We don't want to impose, you're not," he said it firmly, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "The truth is, this house needs voices in it besides my own. I've been talking to ghosts for 3 months. Real people, even temporary ones, are better." Over breakfast, the boys' natural curiosity began to emerge. They peppered Marcus with questions about the ranch, the animals, the mountains visible through the windows. He answered with growing animation, and Eleanor saw glimpses of who he must have been before engaged, knowledgeable patient with children's endless queries. "We had a ranch in Missouri," Henry said. "Not as big as this. Papa was teaching me to ride, but then—" He trailed off, looking at his mother uncertainly. "Then we had to move," Eleanor finished gently. "Sometimes life takes us in directions we don't expect." "Like a storm," William added sagely. "It pushed us here." Marcus studied the boy, struck by the simple truth of it. Yes, exactly like a storm. As the morning progressed, Eleanor insisted on earning their keep by cleaning and cooking. Marcus protested initially, but gave in when she pointed out that she needed to feel useful, not like a charity case. While she worked, he found himself drawn to help, and soon they'd developed an easy rhythm, she wishing he'd drying the boys carefully putting dishes away. "You must have had help before," Eleanor observed, noting how he knew where everything belonged. "A few ranch hands for the cattle and horses. Sarah managed the house herself. Mostly said she liked it that way. After they died, I sent everyone away. Couldn't bear their sympathy, their careful words. The silence was easier." "Is it easier?" Marcus considered. "No, just different. The silence doesn't judge you for surviving." They were interrupted by a knock at the door, sharp, authoritative. Marcus frowned. Nobody should be out in this weather. He opened the door to reveal a man in an expensive coat and hat, his face red with cold and anger. Samuel Garrett stood on the porch, his pale eyes scanning past Marcus to find Eleanor in the hallway. "So, this is where you ran to," Garrett said, his voice oily with false concern. "Mrs. Whitman you left without settling your debts. That's theft, you know." "I owed you rent. I couldn't pay," Eleanor said steadily. "That's not theft. You took furnishings, blankets, items that belonged to the room. Those were our personal belongings. Prove it." Garrett's smile was predatory. "I have witnesses who'll say otherwise." Marcus stepped between them. "Get off my property, Samuel." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "Marcus, I heard you'd gone to ground out here wallowing in self-pity, playing the grieving widower while the rest of us continue living." "Careful!" Marcus's voice dropped dangerously low. "Or what you'll shoot me, fight me. You couldn't even save your own family, and now you're harboring thieves and vagrants." Marcus moved so fast, Garrett didn't have time to react. His fist connected with Garrett's jaw, sending the man sprawling into the snow. "I said, get off my property." Garrett stood, slowly wiping blood from his mouth. "You'll regret this, both of you. I have friends in the territorial government judges who owe me favors. That woman is a thief, and you're harboring a criminal. I'll be back with the law." After he left, Eleanor was shaking. "He can do it. He has that kind of influence. I should leave." "No." Marcus's voice was firm. "You're staying. Let him try to bring the law here. Sheriff McKenna is an old friend, and he knows exactly what kind of man Samuel Garrett is. But if he makes trouble for you, what's he going to do?" "Ruin my life." Marcus laughed bitterly. "I was planning to end it myself last night. Whatever he does can't be worse than that." The boys had watched the confrontation from the stairs, and now Henry spoke up. "Was that a bad man, Mama?" "Yes," Eleanor said simply. "Sometimes there are bad men in the world." "But Mr. Marcus stopped him," William added with satisfaction. "Like in the stories, the hero stops the bad man." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "I'm no hero, boys." "You saved Henry," William insisted, "and you made the bad man go away. That's what heroes do." Later, as Eleanor tucked the boys in for an afternoon rest, she found Marcus standing in what had clearly been Emma's room. Toys still scattered on shelves, small dresses hanging in the wardrobe, a half-finished drawing on a little desk. "I haven't been able to—" He gestured helplessly at the preserved room. "When you're ready," Eleanor said gently. "Or never, if that's what you need." "Sarah would have liked you," he said suddenly. "You have her strength. Different kind maybe, but the same steel underneath. I'm not strong. I'm terrified every moment of every day. Terrified I'll fail them, that they'll end up in an orphanage or worse. But you keep going anyway. That's the only kind of strength that matters." They stood together in the doorway of the empty child's room, two broken people held upright by necessity and the fragile beginning of something neither quite dared to name. Outside, the storm continued sealing them into this house where grief and hope were learning to coexist. "Your boys," Marcus said quietly. "They're good children, bright, kind. You've done well with them despite everything. They're all I have left of Tom. The best parts of him, his curiosity, his gentle nature, none of his demons." Demons. Eleanor hesitated, then shook her head. "Another story for another time, if we have another time." "We have a week at least," Marcus reminded her. "Maybe longer if the snow keeps up. And after that—" He didn't answer immediately, looking into the empty room that still smelled faintly of childhood chalk and flowers and the particular sweetness of a loved child's presence. After that, he finally said, "We'll see what we've become by then, all of us." The third night of the storm brought dreams that shook the house with invisible violence. Eleanor woke to the sound of Marcus crying out from his study, where he'd taken to sleeping rather than face the master bedroom. His voice carried through the walls, not words, but raw animal sounds of loss that made her chest ache with recognition. She found him tangled in blankets on the leather sofa, fighting invisible demons, calling Sarah's name with such desperate longing that Eleanor felt like an intruder in his grief. When she touched his shoulder gently, he jerked awake, his eyes wild and unfocused. "They were here," he gasped. "Sarah and Emma. They were right here, but I couldn't reach them. The fever had them, and I couldn't." "Shh," Eleanor soothed, sitting on the edge of the sofa. "It was a dream, just a dream." "No, it was a memory." His voice broke. "That last night, Sarah begged me to save Emma. She knew she was dying, didn't care about herself, just kept begging me to save our baby. And I promised her. I promised her I would, and then I failed." Eleanor had seen grief before, but this was different. This was guilt, eating someone alive from the inside. "Tell me about that night. Really tell me." Marcus sat up slowly, running shaking hands through his hair. "Why? Because you've been carrying it alone for 3 months. Because sometimes the only way through pain is to speak it aloud to someone who understands." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, staring at the dying embers in the fireplace, he began to speak. "The diphtheria came fast. Sarah noticed Emma's fever first, just thought it was a cold. By that evening, the membrane was forming in her throat. I knew then I'd seen it before, treated it successfully many times. But this strain was different, stronger. I tried everything. The antitoxin I had wasn't powerful enough. I sent riders to Denver for more, but the early snow had already started." He stood pacing to the window, where snow still fell steadily. "Sarah started showing symptoms 12 hours later. She tried to hide. It didn't want me to divide my attention from Emma. But I knew. God help me, I knew. And I had to choose who to focus on." "What kind of choice is that, your wife or your child?" "An impossible one," Eleanor said softly. "I chose Emma. Sarah told me to insist on it. Said a mother's life meant nothing if her child died. So I poured everything into saving Emma while Sarah grew weaker in the next room. I could hear her struggling to breathe, but Emma was crying for her mother, and I couldn't leave. Couldn't." His voice cracked completely. Eleanor rose and went to him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Sarah died at dawn. I wasn't even with her. I was mixing another dose of medicine for Emma, and when I went to check on Sarah, she was gone. Just gone. Alone. After 7 years of marriage, I let her die alone. You were trying to save your daughter, and I failed at that too. Emma held on for 6 more hours. At the end, she wasn't even conscious. The fever had taken her mind, and she died, calling for her mother, not knowing Sarah was already gone, not knowing anything except pain." Marcus turned from the window, his face ravaged. "Do you know what the cruelest part is? Other children in the territory survived. Children I'd treated before Emma got sick. If I'd had more antitoxin, if I'd recognized the severity earlier, if I'd been a better doctor—" "Stop." Eleanor's voice was sharp. "I know this path you're walking. I've walked it myself. The if-only road that leads nowhere but madness." She moved to the fireplace, adding wood to the dying fire. "You want to hear about demons? Tom had them in abundance. The war broke something in him, not his body, but his mind. He'd wake up screaming, thinking he was back in Antietam, seeing bodies piled like cordwood. He started drinking to stop the dreams. Then gambling when drinking wasn't enough." Eleanor stared into the growing flames. "He'd have periods of clarity, weeks or even months, where he was the man I married. Brilliant, gentle, wonderful with the boys. Then something would trigger the memories, a loud noise, the smell of gunpowder, sometimes nothing at all, and he'd disappear for days. Come back, broken, begging forgiveness." "Eleanor, the night he died, he'd been sober for 2 months. We were finally saving money, planning to buy a small farm start over. Then he met some old war companions in town. They invited him for one drink, just one, to toast fallen friends. He never came home." She turned to face Marcus. They found him at the bottom of that mine shaft, but here's what I never told anyone. I don't think the collapse was entirely an accident. His friend said he'd been talking about the war that night, about the men he'd failed to save, about how he didn't deserve a family. He went to inspect that shaft alone at night, drunk in an area he'd already marked as dangerously unstable. The confession hung between them, heavy as the snow outside. I think he was tired of fighting his demons and made a choice that looked like an accident. Left us with nothing, no insurance, no death benefits, no goodbye. Just absence and questions I'll never be able to answer. Marcus moved closer to her. That's why you fought so hard to save your boys. You're trying to save them from their father's legacy. Every day I watch them for signs. Is Henry's quiet nature just shyness or something deeper? When William gets frustrated, is it normal childhood anger? Or the beginning of something darker? I'm terrified they've inherited more than Tom's eyes and hair. They haven't, Marcus said with surprising certainty. I've seen trauma in children-treated families where violence and addiction pass through generations like a curse. Your boys don't have that shadow in them. They're just children who've lost their father and found themselves in a hard world. How can you be sure? Because I've watched them these past days. The way they care for each other, their curiosity about the world, their resilience. That comes from you, not from whatever darkness Tom carried. Eleanor felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Sometimes I hated him, loved him, and hated him in equal measure. Is that terrible? No, it's human. I've hated Sarah too in my worst moments. Hated her for getting sick, for dying, for leaving me here alone. Hated Emma for not being strong enough to survive. Hated myself most of all. They stood close now, two people stripped of pretense by shared pain. Eleanor could smell the leather and wood smoke on him, see the gold flecks in his gray eyes. Last night, Marcus said quietly, when I found you in my house, when I saw Henry sick for a moment, I thought I'd already taken the laudanum, that I was hallucinating. You looked so much like Sarah in that light, and the boys. That must have been awful. No, it was. It was like being offered a second chance I didn't deserve. A chance to save a child, to not fail this time. When Henry's fever broke, when he opened his eyes and asked for water in that little voice, it was like something frozen in me cracked apart. Eleanor reached up, touching the tears on his face. Maybe we're both being offered second chances. I don't know if I can take it. The risk of losing again is terrifying. I know. But what's the alternative? You were ready to die 3 nights ago. I was ready to collapse in that snow, let it all end. But we didn't. We're here alive, carrying our ghosts, but still breathing. From upstairs came a sound, William crying out in his sleep. Eleanor turned toward the stairs, but Marcus stopped her. Let me. I know about nightmares. She followed quietly, watching from the doorway, as Marcus sat on William's bed, his large hand gentle on the boy's shoulder. It's all right, son. You're safe. William's eyes opened, confused and frightened. Papa, no, William. It's Mr. Marcus. You're in my house. Remember, you're safe. The boy blinked, awareness returning. I dreamed about Papa. He was in a dark place and couldn't find his way out. Marcus glanced at Eleanor, understanding passing between them. Sometimes people get lost in dark places. But you're not lost. You're right here with your mother and brother. Will you stay until I fall asleep? Of course. Marcus began to speak quietly, telling a story about a young colt learning to run, his voice steady and soothing. Eleanor watched, seeing how naturally he fell into the role, how much he must miss having a child to comfort. When William was asleep again, they returned downstairs. The fire had built up to a comfortable warmth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Thank you, Eleanor said. Tom never knew how to handle their nightmares. His own were too powerful. Children's fears are simpler. Monsters under beds, losing their parents, being alone. Adult fears are more complex, failing those we love, becoming our worst selves, discovering we're not who we thought we were. What do you fear now? Marcus considered. This, whatever this is between us. I fear it's just grief, seeking comfort. I fear it's real. I fear you'll leave when the snow melts. I fear you'll stay, and I'll fail you, like I failed them. I fear the same things, Eleanor admitted, except I fear you'll realize we're too much trouble, too damaged. 3 broken people clinging to your coattails, dragging you back when you're trying to grieve. Maybe that's what I need to be dragged back. These 3 days having you all here, it's the first time I've wanted to see mourning since they died. They sat together on the sofa, not touching, but aware of each other's warmth. The storm continued outside, but inside the house felt different, still heavy with memory, but no longer suffocating. Sarah wrote in her journal every night. Marcus said suddenly, I haven't been able to read it, but I know her last entry was the night before she got sick. She wrote about planning Emma's birthday party, about teaching her to bake a cake. Such normal, everyday plans. Tom left letters. Eleanor shared, hidden in his engineering notebooks. Apologies mostly for things he hadn't done yet, but knew he would. I burned them all. Couldn't bear the boys finding them someday. Were you right to... I don't know. Maybe they deserve the truth about their father, or maybe they deserve the chance to remember him as the good man he sometimes was. Both can be true. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the wind and the settling of the old house. Finally, Eleanor stood. I should go to bed. Dawn comes early with children. Eleanor. Marcus stood as well. These past days, I'm grateful. Whatever happens when the storm passes, I'm grateful you knocked on my door. Even though we interrupted your plans, especially because of that, Sarah always said I was too stubborn to know when I needed help. Apparently it takes a blizzard and 3 strangers to make me listen. As Eleanor climbed the stairs, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months' hope. Not the bright, certain hope of youth, but the quieter, more careful hope of those who've been broken and are learning to heal. It was fragile as frost on glass, but it was there, growing stronger with each passing hour. In his study, Marcus opened Sarah's journal for the first time, reading her final entry by candlelight. Her words were cheerful, full of plans and small complaints about his tendency to track mud through the house. At the bottom, she'd written, Marcus worked late again with the animals. Sometimes I think he loves them more than us, but then I see him watching Emma sleep, and I know we are his whole world. How lucky we are. He closed the journal gently, then did something he hadn't done since their death. He spoke to Sarah honestly, not in guilt or anguish, but as if she were simply in the next room. There's a woman here, Sarah. She's nothing like you, darker, quieter, carrying her own ghosts. But she makes me remember why I wanted to live before. Her boys remind me of Emma not in looks, but in spirit. I don't know what you'd think of this of them, of me finding something worth staying for. But I hope you'd understand. I hope you'd want me to try. The wind answered him, rattling the windows, but for the first time it didn't sound like mockery. It sounded almost like permission. The 4th morning brought an unexpected break in the storm. Not an ending, but a pause, like the world taking a breath. Weak sunlight filtered through the clouds, revealing a landscape transformed into something from a fairy tale, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. The snow had drifted against the barn doors, 8 feet high, and ice hung from the eaves like dragon's teeth. Marcus stood at the barn entrance, having tunneled through the drift before dawn, checking on the horses. The animals were restless, sensing the storm's temporary reprieve. Among them, a mare named Celeste was showing signs of distress. Her breathing labored, her eyes rolling with pain. "Easy, girl," he murmured, running practiced hands along her swollen sides. "I know it hurts." "Is she sick?" Henry's voice came from behind him. Marcus turned to find both boys bundled in oversized coats they'd found in the mudroom. their faces bright with curiosity despite the cold. "She's going to have a baby," Marcus explained. "But something's wrong. The foal is turned the wrong way." "Can you fix it?" William asked, moving closer despite his obvious nervousness around the large animal. "I'm going to try." Marcus glanced toward the house. "Does your mother know you're out here?" "She's making breakfast," Henry said, which wasn't exactly an answer. "We wanted to see the horses. Will the baby horse die?" The directness of the question caught Marcus off guard. Children he'd forgotten didn't dance around death the way adults did. "Not if I can help it." Eleanor appeared in the barn doorway, her face flushed from the cold. "Boys, you can't just disappear." She stopped taking in the scene. "What's happening?" "Celeste is foaling." "Breech presentation." Marcus was already rolling up his sleeves. "It's going to be difficult. What can I do?" He looked at her surprised. "You don't have to." "Marcus, I've helped birth calves on my uncle's farm. Tell me what you need." For the next 2 hours, they worked together with an intensity that left no room for self-consciousness. Eleanor held Celeste's head, speaking soothing words, while Marcus worked to turn the foal. The boys fetched water and towels, following instructions with remarkable focus. When Marcus's strength began to flag, Eleanor took over, holding the mare steady while he caught his breath. "Almost," he muttered, sweat beading his forehead despite the cold. "Just a little more there." The foal slid free in a rush of fluid and movement, a dark, wet bundle that lay still for one heart-stopping moment before shuddering to life. Celeste nickered weakly, turning to nose her baby. "It's a girl," Marcus announced, grinning broadly. "A filly. Perfect and healthy." The boys whooped with delight, and Eleanor found herself laughing, tears streaming down her face. Birth after so much death, life asserting itself in a barn that had seen too much silence. "What will you name her?" William asked, reaching out tentatively to touch the filly's soft nose. Marcus looked at the newborn, then at the family surrounding him. "Hope," he said quietly. "Her name is Hope." As they watched the filly struggle to her feet, on impossibly long legs, Henry tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "You saved them both, like you saved me." "We saved them," Marcus corrected, looking at Eleanor. "Together." Their eyes met and held something shifting between them in that moment. Not just gratitude or shared accomplishment, but recognition of partnership, of possibility, of something neither had expected to find in the ruins of their separate griefs. Later, as Eleanor prepared lunch, she found herself humming the first time she'd done so since Tom's death. The boys were in the living room, Marcus teaching them to play chess with an old set that had belonged to his father. Their laughter carried into the kitchen, warming her more than the stove. "Check," William announced proudly. Then immediately, "Wait, what does that mean again?" "It means your king is in danger," Marcus explained patiently. "You need to protect him." "Like you protected us from the bad man," Henry added matter-of-factly. Eleanor paused in her cooking, listening. "That was different," Marcus said. "That was just being brave," William finished. "Mama says being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right even when you're scared." "Your mother is wise." "She's the smartest person in the whole world," Henry agreed. "She can read and write and do numbers and make pie from nothing but flour and apples." "From nothing?" Marcus sounded amused. "Well, almost nothing. We didn't have much food before we came here. Mama would make one apple into a pie that fed all 3 of us. She said it was magic, but I think it was just being really good at cutting things thin." Eleanor's heart ached at her son's matter-of-fact acceptance of their poverty. She'd tried so hard to shield them from the worst of it. "Your mother is remarkable," Marcus said softly, and something in his tone made Eleanor's cheeks warm. She was saved from further eavesdropping by a knock at the door, unusual given the weather. Marcus went to answer it, returning with Sheriff McKenna, a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes and a deputy's star pinned to his coat. "Mrs. Whitman." The sheriff tipped his hat. "I'm sorry to intrude, but I needed to speak with you about Samuel Garrett." Eleanor's stomach dropped. "Has he made a complaint?" "Several, actually. Claims you stole from him, that you're wanted in Missouri for fraud, all manner of nonsense." The sheriff's expression was sympathetic. "I know Sam Garrett for what he is, ma'am. But he's got Judge Harrison's ear, and Harrison owes him money. They're pushing for a formal investigation." "But I didn't." "I know." McKenna held up a hand. "That's why I'm here unofficially, to warn you, and to suggest a solution." Marcus stepped forward. "What kind of solution?" McKenna looked between them, a small smile playing at his lips. "Well, it occurs to me that if Mrs. Whitman were to remarry, say to a respectable rancher with standing in the community, it would be mighty hard for Garrett to pursue his claims. A husband's protection carries legal weight, especially when that husband is known to be an honest man who's contributed to this territory's growth." Eleanor felt her face flame. "Sheriff, I couldn't possibly. That's not just something to consider," McKenna said mildly. "The law's a funny thing. Sometimes it protects the wrong people, unless good folks find creative ways around it." He tipped his hat again. "I'll hold Garrett off as long as I can, but he's determined. You've got maybe a week before he finds a judge willing to issue papers." After the sheriff left, an awkward silence filled the kitchen. The boys, sensing adult tension, had disappeared upstairs. "Eleanor," Marcus began. "Don't." She turned away, busying herself with dishes that didn't need washing. "I won't have you forced into something out of pity or obligation." "Is that what you think this would be? What else? We've known each other 4 days, Marcus. 4 days of extraordinary circumstances that have nothing to do with real life." "And what is real life?" He moved closer. "Is it the emptiness I was living in before you arrived? Is it you trying to survive alone with 2 boys in a world that offers no mercy to widows? Or is it this, what we found here together? This is just proximity and desperation creating an illusion." "Stop." His voice was firm but gentle. "You're doing what you did with Tom's memory, explaining away something true because it scares you." Eleanor whirled to face him. "Of course it scares me. You were planning to die 4 nights ago. How do I trust someone who was ready to leave the world entirely? Because I chose not to. Because you and your boys reminded me why living matters. Because for the first time in 3 months, I want to see tomorrow." "That's not enough for marriage." "Then what is love?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "I loved Sarah with everything I had, and it didn't save us from tragedy. You loved Tom despite his demons, and it didn't prevent your loss. Maybe what we need isn't love but partnership, understanding, a shared commitment to moving forward instead of drowning in the past." Eleanor stared at him, her heart racing. "You're suggesting a business arrangement." "I'm suggesting a real marriage based on respect, partnership, and the affection that's already growing between us. I care for your boys. You've brought life back to this house. We work well together. This morning proved that. And if Garrett wasn't threatening me, would you still be suggesting this?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Maybe not this quickly. But Eleanor, when you walked through that door in the storm, something changed. Call it fate, God, or just chance, but you're here. We're here. And it feels right in a way. Nothing has, since I lost them." Before Eleanor could respond, Henry's voice called from upstairs, frightened. "Mama, William's sick." They rushed upstairs to find William burning with fever, the same symptoms Henry had shown days before. But William's smaller body was already struggling more. His breathing labored. Marcus immediately went into doctor mode, examining the boy with gentle efficiency. "It's the same fever, but he's fighting it harder. His lungs are already affected." For the next 6 hours, they battled for William's life. Marcus drew on every bit of knowledge he possessed, while Eleanor never left her son's side. Henry sat in the corner quiet and terrified, clutching the chess piece he'd been playing, with the king William had been protecting in their game. As night fell, William's fever spiked dangerously. In his delirium, he called out for his father, then for Marcus, unable to distinguish between past and present. "Please," Eleanor whispered, her lips against her son's burning forehead. "Please don't take him too." Marcus worked tirelessly, adjusting medicines, cooling the fever, clearing the child's lungs. At one point, he met Eleanor's eyes across the sickbed. "I won't let him die," he said with quiet ferocity. "I swear to you, Eleanor, not this time." Around midnight, the crisis peaked. William's breathing became so labored that each breath was a battle. Marcus made a decision, a risky treatment he'd only read about, but never tried. "I need you to trust me," he told Eleanor. "This might save him, or do it." She didn't hesitate. "I trust you." The treatment was harsh steam, so hot it seemed dangerous medicines that made William vomit positions that seemed to hurt more than help. But slowly, agonizingly, it worked. The congestion in his lungs began to break up. His breathing eased. By dawn, the fever had broken. William opened his eyes, weak but lucid. "Mama." Eleanor sobbed with relief, gathering him carefully into her arms. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." "Mr. Marcus." William's eyes found him. "Did you save me like you saved Henry?" "We all saved you," Marcus said, his own voice rough with emotion. "Your mother's love, Henry's prayers, and maybe a little medical knowledge. And you didn't give up," William said, with the devastating honesty of children. "Even when it was really hard, you didn't give up." Later, with William sleeping peacefully and Henry curled up beside him, Eleanor found Marcus on the porch, watching the sunrise paint the snow-covered mountains pink and gold. "You kept your promise," she said quietly. "Almost didn't. If that treatment hadn't worked, but it did." She stood beside him, close enough to feel his warmth. "You fought for my son like he was your own." "He felt like mine," Marcus admitted. In that moment, fighting for his life, it felt like fighting for Emma all over again. But this time, I could win. Eleanor made a decision, then one born not of desperation, but of recognition. "Yes." Marcus turned to her confused. "Yes. To your proposal, to marriage, to partnership, to whatever this is between us that's too new to name, but too real to deny." "Eleanor, you don't have to, not because of Garrett, or—" She silenced him by taking his hand. "I'm not saying yes because of Garrett. I'm saying yes because when William was dying, I absolutely knew that you would fight for him until your last breath. Because you've made my boys smile again. Because you look at me and see more than a desperate widow. Because I look at you and see more than a grieving widower. What do you see? A future, complicated and uncertain, but a future nonetheless." Marcus turned their joined hands over, studying how they fit together. "When?" Sheriff McKenna said, "We have a week." "No, I mean, when do you want to marry? If we're doing this, I want to do it right. Not rushed, not in fear, but as a choice. Our choice." Eleanor considered. 3 days. After William is stronger. "We'll tell the boys tomorrow. Let them adjust to the idea." "They already asked me if I was going to be their new papa," Marcus confessed. "Yesterday, while you were hanging laundry. What did you say?" "That it was up to their mother, but I would be honored if she'd have me." Eleanor laughed, surprising herself. 4 days ago, I was ready to collapse in the snow. Now I'm planning a wedding." Life has a strange sense of humor. Or timing. She squeezed his hand. "Marcus, I need you to know I may never love you the way I loved Tom before he changed. That first, innocent love. And I'll never love you the way I loved Sarah. But Eleanor, what we could have might be different. Not less, just different. Love born from understanding, from choosing each other, not in youth's blindness, but with full knowledge of what loss means. A practical love, a real love, the kind that builds slowly, carefully on foundations of respect and genuine affection. The kind that might actually last because we know how precious and fragile it all is. As the sun climbed higher, bathing them in warmth despite the winter cold, Eleanor felt something she hadn't experienced since Tom's death. Not just hope, but certainty. This was right. Unexpected, unconventional, perhaps too quick by society's standards, but right. "The boys will be thrilled," she said. "And Emma would have loved them," Marcus replied softly. "She always wanted brothers." They stood together, hands linked, watching the world wake up around them. In 3 days, they would marry. In a week, they would face whatever Garrett threw at them. But for now, in this moment, they had found something neither had thought to look for a second chance, not just at survival, but at happiness. The filly Hope whinnied from the barn, her voice young and strong, calling to her mother. New life asserting itself, demanding attention, refusing to be ignored. Marcus and Eleanor smiled at each other, understanding the message. Life goes on. Even after the worst losses, even in the depths of winter, life finds a way to continue. And sometimes, if you're very lucky or very brave, it offers you the chance to begin again. The morning they told the boys about the marriage, Eleanor had prepared a special breakfast flapjacks with the last of the maple syrup eggs from the chickens that had survived the storm, and even a small pot of chocolate Marcus had been saving. She wanted the moment to be sweet, memorable, cushioned with comfort food and warmth. "Boys." Eleanor began, her hands folded carefully around her coffee cup. "Mr. Marcus and I have something to tell you." Henry and William looked up from their plates, syrup on their chins, eyes bright with curiosity. "Are we staying forever?" William asked immediately. "Because I want to stay forever." Marcus and Eleanor exchanged glances. "How would you feel," Marcus said carefully, "if your mother and I got married, if we became a real family?" The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before both boys erupted in cheers. William actually stood on his chair, raising his arms in triumph, while Henry, quieter but no less pleased, smiled so wide it transformed his usually serious face. "You'll be our papa?" Henry asked Marcus directly. "If you'll have me." "Forever and ever," William pressed. "Forever and ever. And we can live here always with the horses and Hope and everything. This would be your home, our home." William launched himself at Marcus, wrapping his small arms around the man's neck with such force that Marcus had to catch himself on the table. Henry moved more slowly but with equal determination, joining the embrace. Eleanor watched tears sliding down her cheeks as Marcus held her boys, their boys, with infinite tenderness. "Mama." "Why are you crying?" William asked, noticing her tears. "Sometimes people cry when they're happy," she explained. "That's silly," William declared, but he ran to hug her anyway, bringing Marcus and Henry with him until they were all tangled together, a knot of arms and laughter and syrup-sticky fingers. Sheriff McKenna arrived that afternoon with the necessary papers, and an unexpected companion, Reverend Davies, a circuit preacher who happened to be in town. "Thought you might want to make things official, proper-like," McKenna said with a knowing smile. "Judge Harrison might question a civil ceremony, but he can't argue with God's blessing." "We were planning to wait 3 more days," Eleanor said, though her protest was weak. "Garrett's been making noise all over town," McKenna warned. "The sooner you're protected by marriage, the better. Besides," he winked at the boys, "I brought witnesses." Behind him, several people emerged from wagons, the foreman from the neighboring ranch with his wife, the schoolteacher from town, even Doc Hartley, who'd retired, but still commanded respect in the community. They'd all braved the still treacherous roads to be here. "Marcus helped birth my daughter's baby last spring when Doc Hartley was laid up," the foreman's wife explained. "When Sheriff McKenna said you needed witnesses for a wedding, we couldn't come fast enough." Eleanor was overwhelmed. These people didn't know her, but they'd come for Marcus, and by extension, for her and the boys. "I don't have a proper dress," she said weakly. "I brought one," the schoolteacher, Miss Catherine, said shyly. She was young, perhaps 25, with kind brown eyes. "It was my mother's. She was about your size. It would be an honor if you'd wear it. The dress was simple, but beautiful ivory silk with small pearl buttons and delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. It fit Eleanor as if it had been made for her. Miss Catherine helped her pin up her hair, weaving in a few winter roses from Marcus's greenhouse that had somehow survived. "You're beautiful, Mama," Henry said solemnly when she emerged. "Like a princess," William added. "Mr. Marcus is going to fall over when he sees you." Marcus didn't fall over, but he did stop breathing for a moment when Eleanor descended the stairs. He'd changed into his best suit, the one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral, now repurposed for a beginning rather than an ending. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. The ceremony was held in the living room, the furniture pushed back to make space. Reverend Davies, a man who'd seen enough of frontier life to understand that love came in many forms and timelines, spoke simply but powerfully. "Marriage," he said, "is not always about young love and easy promises. Sometimes it's about two people who've walked through fire, choosing to help each other heal. Sometimes it's about building family from the broken pieces of what came before." When it came time for vows, Marcus had prepared something. He pulled a worn paper from his pocket, his hands shaking slightly. "Eleanor," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "4 days ago, I was ready to give up on life. You and your boys didn't just save me from that choice, you reminded me why choosing life matters. I promised to protect you, provide for you, and stand beside you through whatever comes. I promised to raise Henry and William as my own sons, to love them and guide them as best I can. I promised to honor the losses we've both suffered while building something new together. I may not be perfect, but I will be present, faithful, and grateful every day that you chose to knock on my door in that storm." Eleanor hadn't prepared anything, but words came anyway from somewhere deep and true. "Marcus, you gave us shelter when we had none, hope when mine was gone, and a future when I couldn't see past the next meal. You fought for my children's lives as fiercely as any father could. I promise to stand with you in grief and in joy, to help you remember that life is worth living, to make this house a home again. I promise to be your partner in all things, to trust you with my boys and my heart, even when trust feels dangerous. I choose you not as a refuge from hardship, but as a companion through it." "The rings?" Reverend Davies asked. Marcus produced 2 simple gold bands. "These were my parents," he explained quietly. "They were married 43 years. Seemed like a good omen." As he slipped the ring onto Eleanor's finger, William piped up, "Does this mean we're really staying forever now?" The room erupted in gentle laughter. "Yes," Marcus and Eleanor said in unison. "Forever." After the ceremony, the small gathering shared a meal Eleanor and Miss Catherine quickly put together. The wedding cake was actually cornbread with honey, but nobody minded. Stories were shared about Marcus's kindness over the years. Animals saved neighbors, helped quiet generosities that painted a picture of a man very different from the broken soul Eleanor had found that first night. "Sarah would be happy," Doc Hartley said quietly to Marcus. "She wouldn't want you mourning forever. And those boys, they're lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one," Marcus replied, watching William and Henry showing off Hope the filly to the guests through the window. As evening approached and the guests prepared to leave, Sheriff McKenna pulled Marcus and Eleanor aside. "Garrett's going to be furious when he hears," he warned. "He'll likely show up within the day. You need to be ready." "We will be," Marcus said firmly. "And there's something else," McKenna continued. "I did some checking on Garrett's claims about Eleanor. Turns out there are no warrants in Missouri, but there is a warrant for Garrett himself in Kansas. Fraud, extortion, and assault. He's been using different names, but it's definitely him." Eleanor felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "So he can't do anything legally, but cornered rats bite hardest. Be careful." That night, after the boys were asleep in their room, officially their room, now Eleanor stood in the master bedroom she would share with Marcus, suddenly nervous. They'd married for practical reasons, for protection and partnership, but now faced with the reality of married life, she felt uncertain. Marcus entered equally hesitant. "Eleanor, I want you to know there's no expectation. We can take time to know each other better. I can sleep in the study if you prefer." "No," she said softly. "We're married. We should start as we mean to continue as partners sharing space and life." She paused, but slowly, carefully. He nodded, relief visible on his face. Slowly and carefully, they prepared for bed with the awkwardness of strangers and the courtesy of friends. When they finally lay side by side in the dark, a careful distance between them, Eleanor spoke. "Are you sorry that it happened so fast?" "No," Marcus answered immediately. "Are you?" "No. It feels right. Strange and sudden, but right. Like the storm brought you here for a reason." "I don't believe in fate," Eleanor said, "but I'm starting to believe in second chances." Marcus turned toward her in the darkness, his hand finding hers across the space between them. "Thank you for choosing this, for choosing us. Thank you for being worth choosing." They fell asleep, holding hands, the first peaceful sleep either had experienced in months. No nightmares came that night, no memories of loss, no ghosts of the past. Just quiet breathing and the sense that something new was beginning. In the morning, Eleanor woke to find Marcus already upstanding by the window, watching the sunrise. The storm clouds had finally broken completely, revealing a sky so blue it hurt to look at. "Good morning, wife," he said softly, testing the word. "Good morning, husband," she replied, finding she liked how it sounded. From down the hall came the sound of the boys waking their voices, carrying clearly. "Henry, we have a papa now." "I know. A real papa who won't leave. He promised forever and ever." "Do you think he meant it?" "Mr. Marcus, I mean papa doesn't say things he doesn't mean." Eleanor and Marcus smiled at each other, the boys' innocent trust, both a gift and a responsibility. "We should get up," Eleanor said. "Start our first full day as a family." "Our second chance at family," Marcus corrected, then added quickly. "That doesn't diminish what came before." "I know." Eleanor rose, moving to stand beside him at the window. "We're not replacing anything. We're building something new from the pieces we have left." Outside, the world sparkled with fresh snow and possibility. The ranch stretched out before them, hundreds of acres of challenge and opportunity. In the barn, Hope the filly was probably demanding her breakfast. Chickens needed feeding. Horses needed tending. Life needed living. "Mama, Papa," William's voice called excitedly. "Come see Hope is standing on her own." "Coming." They called back in unison, then looked at each other and laughed. "Ready for this?" Marcus asked. "No," Eleanor answered honestly, "but I haven't been ready for anything that's happened since Tom died. And somehow it's working out anyway." They dressed quickly and joined the boys, beginning their first full day as the Sullivan family. There would be challenges ahead. Garrett's anger, the ranch's demands, the complex process of blending broken hearts into a whole family. But for now, watching their boys marvel at a newborn filly in the morning light. Everything felt possible. The decision to marry had been quick, perhaps reckless by conventional standards. But as Eleanor watched Marcus lift William onto his shoulders so he could see better, as she felt Henry slip his hand into hers, with easy trust, she knew they'd chosen correctly. Not perfectly, not without risk, but correctly. Sometimes the best decisions were the ones made quickly from instinct rather than exhaustive deliberation. Sometimes salvation came not from careful planning, but from saying yes to unexpected possibility. The first week of marriage unfolded like a careful dance, each person learning the steps while trying not to tread on tender toes. Eleanor discovered that Marcus rose before dawn every day, a habit from his veterinary practice that grief hadn't broken. She learned he took his coffee black but sweet, that he hummed when concentrating, and that he still reached for Sarah's favorite cup before catching himself. Marcus learned that Eleanor sang while cooking, but only when she thought no one was listening, that she arranged and rearranged things when anxious, and that she checked on the boys 3 times each night, a habit born from Henry's bout with fever. The boys adapted fastest, as children do. Within days, Mr. Marcus had become Papa, as naturally as breathing. They followed him around the ranch like devoted shadows, absorbing everything he taught them about horses, cattle, and the rhythms of ranch life. "Papa, why does Hope wobble when she walks?" William asked on their 4th morning as a family. "Her legs are still learning to work together," Marcus explained, steadying the filly as she nursed. "Like how you wobbled when you first learned to walk." "I never wobbled," William declared with 5-year-old certainty. "Oh, yes, you did." Eleanor laughed from where she was mucking out stalls she'd insisted on sharing all ranch work. "You fell so many times I considered wrapping you in pillows." "Mama," William protested, but he was grinning. These moments of easy familiarity surprised them all. How quickly they developed inside jokes, shared references, the shorthand of family life. But there were awkward moments too. The first came when Mrs. Patterson from the neighboring ranch arrived with a welcome basket and barely concealed curiosity. She was the territory's most efficient gossip, and Eleanor knew whatever she observed would be spread across the county by week's end. "My dear Mrs. Sullivan," she gushed, emphasizing the new name. Such a whirlwind romance. Why, no one even knew Marcus was courting anyone. "Sometimes the heart knows quickly what it wants," Eleanor replied carefully, accepting the basket of preserves and bread. "Indeed. And how fortunate for you finding such a prosperous husband after your difficulties." Her eyes swept over Eleanor's simple dress, clearly calculating its worth. "You must tell me how you met. The whole territory is simply dying to know." Marcus appeared in the doorway, having heard voices. "Mrs. Patterson," he said coolly, "how kind of you to visit. I'm sure you understand we're still settling in as a family and aren't quite ready for extended social calls." The dismissal was polite but firm. Mrs. Patterson's face flushed, but she recovered quickly. Of course. I'll just leave this small gift. Perhaps when you're settled, you'll join us for Sunday dinner." "Perhaps," Marcus said noncommittally. After she left, Eleanor sank into a chair. "The whole territory is talking about us." "Let them talk." Marcus sat beside her. "They talked when Sarah died, when I sent everyone away, when I became a hermit. Their opinions never helped or hurt anything. But the boys will face some curiosity at school when it reopens, yes. But children forget scandal quickly when there are games to play and lessons to learn." That evening, their first real challenge as a couple arose. William had been playing too roughly with Hope, and the filly had kicked him not hard, but enough to leave a bruise and teach a lesson. The boy came crying to Eleanor, who immediately went into protective mother mode. "He needs to be more careful," Marcus said after examining the bruise. "Horses aren't toys." "He's just a child," Eleanor protested. "He didn't know better." "Which is why he needs to learn. Ranch life is dangerous if you don't respect the animals." They stood facing each other in the kitchen, their first real disagreement hanging between them. Henry watched from the doorway, worry creasing his young face. "You're right," Eleanor said finally. "But perhaps you could teach him instead of just expecting him to know." "You're right too," Marcus conceded. "I'm used to Emma, who grew up around animals. I need to remember the boys are still learning." They found William in the barn, sitting far from Hope's stall, tears dried but face dejected. "Come here, son," Marcus said gently. William approached hesitantly. "Let me teach you something about horses." For the next hour, Marcus patiently explained horse behavior, how to read their moods, how to approach them safely. Eleanor watched, seeing how naturally teaching came to him, how William absorbed every word. "Horses are like people," Marcus concluded. They need respect and gentleness. Treat Hope that way, and she'll be your friend for life." "I'm sorry I scared her," William said solemnly. "She forgives you." See, Marcus led him to Hope, showing him how to properly offer his hand for the filly to sniff. Hope nickered softly, nuzzling William's palm. That night, as they prepared for bed, Eleanor said, "You're good with them. Patient." "Sarah always said I was better with animals than people," Marcus replied, then caught himself. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't. Don't apologize for mentioning her. She was your wife. She's part of who you are." "Tom's part of who you are, too," Marcus said carefully. Eleanor considered this. "The good parts, yes. His curiosity, his initial kindness, the way he loved the boys before the darkness took over. But I'm trying to leave his demons buried with him." "Do you think we'll ever stop measuring this life against what came before?" "I hope not entirely," Eleanor said thoughtfully. "Those comparisons help us appreciate what we have now. But I hope someday the comparisons bring more gratitude than pain." As the week progressed, they developed routines. Mornings began with coffee together before the boys woke, a quiet time to plan the day. Marcus would check the animals while Eleanor prepared breakfast. The boys would help with age-appropriate chores, collecting eggs, feeding chickens, brushing the gentler horses. Afternoons were for learning. Eleanor had resumed teaching the boys their letters and numbers, and Marcus joined when he could, adding practical mathematics, measuring feed, calculating fence lengths, the economics of ranching. "If a horse eats 30 pounds of hay per day," Marcus posed one afternoon, "and we have 15 horses, how much hay do we need for a week?" Henry's face scrunched in concentration. 30 times 15 is 450 pounds per day." "Excellent. And for a week, 450 times 7. Henry worked it out on paper. 150 pounds. "That's a lot of hay," William exclaimed. "Which is why we grow our own," Marcus explained. "Next summer you'll help with haying." Evenings were for family. They'd gather in the living room, Marcus teaching the boys chess or checkers while Eleanor mended clothes or read aloud. It was during one of these readings that another moment of awkwardness arose. Eleanor was reading from Pilgrim's Progress when she came across a passage about marriage and family. She hesitated, aware of how their unconventional beginning might color the words. "Why did you stop, Mama?" Henry asked. "The passage is about—" She glanced at Marcus, "about how families are meant to be formed." Marcus understood immediately. "Families form in many ways," he said to the boys. "Some start with long courtships, some with arrangements, some with unexpected circumstances. What matters isn't how they begin, but how they choose to continue." "Like us?" William asked. "We began because of the storm." "Exactly like us," Marcus confirmed. "The storm brought us together, but we choose every day to be a family." Later that week, a more serious challenge arose. Marcus had to put down one of his horses, an old mare who developed an incurable lameness. The boys had never encountered this aspect of ranch life. "Why can't you fix her?" William demanded, tears streaming. "You're a doctor." "Sometimes," Marcus said gently, "the kindest thing we can do is end suffering we can't fix." "But that's giving up." Eleanor knelt beside her son. "No, sweetheart, it's mercy. Like when Papa Marcus could have given up on himself, but chose to help us instead. Sometimes living means making hard choices about pain, our own and others." The boys insisted on being present for the burial, their first real encounter with death since their father's passing. They stood solemnly as Marcus said words over the grave about service and rest, about the cycle of life on a ranch. That night, Henry asked, "Papa, will you have to put us down if we get too hurt?" Marcus was shocked. "No, never. People are different. We fight for people until the very end." "You fought for me when I was sick," Henry remembered. "And for me," William added. "And I always will," Marcus promised. "That's what fathers do." The word hung in the air, father, not stepfather or guardian, but father. Eleanor saw Marcus's eyes shine with unshed tears. As their second week began, the household had found its rhythm. Eleanor had reorganized the kitchen to her liking, her preserves, joining Sarah's on the shelves, past and present coexisting. Marcus had moved his veterinary supplies to make room for the boys' belongings in the storage areas. The house was becoming theirs, not his or hers, but theirs. One morning, Eleanor found Marcus staring at the family photograph wall pictures of his parents. Sarah's parents, his wedding portrait with Sarah. "We should add new pictures," she suggested softly, "not replace. Add. Your history is part of our present. The boys should know about Emma, about the family that came before them." Marcus pulled her close, the first truly spontaneous affection between them. "How did you become so wise?" "Pain is a harsh teacher," Eleanor replied, relaxing into his embrace. "But it does teach." That afternoon, they had their first real success as a couple. A neighboring rancher arrived with a colicky horse, desperate. Marcus examined the animal while Eleanor assisted anticipating his needs, working in seamless harmony. "Hold him steady," Marcus instructed, and Eleanor did speaking soothingly to the distressed animal while Marcus administered treatment. Within an hour, the horse was improving. The rancher tried to pay, but Marcus refused. "Neighbors help neighbors," he said simply. After the rancher left full of gratitude, Eleanor smiled at Marcus. "We make a good team." "We do," he agreed, then surprised them both by kissing her forehead gently. "We really do." The boys who'd been watching from the barn door erupted in giggles. "Papa kissed Mama," William announced unnecessarily. "That's what married people do," Henry informed his brother with 6-year-old authority. That evening, as they sat down to dinner, a rich stew Eleanor had simmering all day, Marcus raised his coffee cup. "A toast," he said, "to 2 weeks of being a family." "Only 2 weeks?" William asked. "It feels like forever." "The good kind of forever," Henry added quickly. Eleanor raised her cup, meeting Marcus's eyes. "To building something new from broken pieces." "To second chances," Marcus added. "To hope." William contributed, making everyone laugh, since he clearly meant the filly, but the word carried deeper meaning. As they clinked cups, the boys with their milk, the adults with coffee, Eleanor felt something settle in her chest. Not quite peace, not quite happiness, but the foundation for both. They were building something here day by day, choice by choice. That night, a blizzard warning came through the telegraph at the general store, delivered by a rider. Another storm was coming, possibly worse than the one that had brought them together. "We need to prepare," Marcus said, already making mental lists. "Secure the animals, stock food and water, check the roof repairs." "Together," Eleanor said firmly. "We prepare together." The next morning, they worked as a unit. Marcus and Eleanor reinforced the barn, while the boys helped move the chickens to more secure shelter. They stocked firewood, prepared medical supplies in case of emergencies, and cached food where it wouldn't freeze. "Why so much preparation?" Henry asked, tired from the work. "Because," Marcus explained, "the first storm brought us together, unprepared. This one we face as a family, ready for whatever comes." As the first snowflakes began to fall that evening, they stood together on the porch, watching the sky darken. The boys were excited rather than scared, secure in their new family's strength. "Whatever comes," Eleanor murmured, echoing Marcus's words. "We'll handle it." Marcus agreed, his arm around her shoulders, the boys pressed against their legs. Together. The house behind them was warm, stocked, and ready, but more importantly, it was home. Not perfect, still haunted by losses, but filling slowly with new memories, new laughter, new love. Mrs. Patterson would have been scandalized to know that the new Mrs. Sullivan still kept her first husband's letters, though hidden away, that Mr. Sullivan still talked to his deceased wife sometimes when he thought no one was listening. She would have been shocked that they still slept carefully apart, building physical intimacy as slowly as emotional connection. But the boys knew nothing of adult complications. They knew only that they had a mother who sang more often now, a father who taught them wonderful things, a warm house, and enough food. They knew that Hope the filly recognized their voices and came when called, that the chickens had names courtesy of William, and that Papa's strong arms could lift them high enough to touch the barn rafters. As the second storm began in earnest, the Sullivan family retreated inside. Marcus built up the fire while Eleanor warmed cider on the stove. The boys set up the checkerboard, arguing good-naturedly about who would play first. "Tell us the story again," William requested, "about how the first storm brought us together." Marcus and Eleanor exchanged smiles. It was already becoming family mythology, the story of their beginning. It was the coldest night of the year. Marcus began, his storytelling voice emerging. "And we were lost in the snow," Henry added, knowing his part. "Until Mama knocked on the door," William continued. "And everything changed," Eleanor finished softly. Outside, the wind howled, but inside the Sullivan family was warm, safe, and slowly, carefully, lovingly building their new life together. The storm that had brought them together was being eclipsed by the life they were choosing to build, one day, one small moment, one act of love at a time. The house that had been dying with grief was learning to live again, filled with the complicated, messy, beautiful reality of a family stitched together from loss, but held by growing bonds of genuine affection. It wasn't the family any of them had planned, but increasingly, it was the family they needed. The second blizzard passed after 3 days, leaving the world crystallized in white perfection. But unlike the first storm that had brought them together, this one felt like a test they'd passed as a family. They emerged from the house together, the boys racing ahead to check on Hope, while Marcus and Eleanor surveyed the property for damage. "Fence is down in the north pasture," Marcus observed, shading his eyes against the sun's glare on snow. "We'll fix it together," Eleanor said, and he smiled at how naturally she'd said "we." Their domestic harmony was interrupted that afternoon by an unexpected arrival. Charlotte Whitman, Eleanor's sister-in-law, Tom's younger sister. She stepped down from the hired sleigh, dressed in city finery, wholly inappropriate for ranch life, her disapproving expression evident even from a distance. Eleanor Charlotte's voice was ice itself. "I heard the most extraordinary rumors in Denver, that you'd remarried, barely 6 months after my brother's death." Eleanor felt Marcus tense beside her, but she touched his arm gently. "Charlotte, this is my husband, Marcus Sullivan, Marcus Tom's sister." Charlotte's eyes swept over Marcus dismissively. "A rancher. How practical of you, Eleanor." "Aunt Charlotte." William ran up, always eager for family, but she barely glanced at him. "William, you've grown. You look more like your father every day." The way she said it sounded like an accusation. "Why don't we go inside?" Eleanor suggested, though dread pooled in her stomach. "You must be cold from your journey." Once inside, Charlotte's critique began in earnest. She examined everything, the house, the furnishings, the boys' clothes, Marcus himself with barely concealed disdain. "I suppose it's comfortable enough," she conceded about the house, though hardly the proper environment for raising Tom's sons. They should be in school, in civilization, not running wild on a ranch. "They're receiving an excellent education," Eleanor said firmly. "I teach them daily, and Marcus." "Yes, I'm sure a veterinarian is well equipped to educate future gentlemen." Charlotte interrupted her tone, making it clear what she thought of Marcus's profession. Marcus spoke for the first time since her arrival. "Ma'am, I understand you're concerned for your nephews, but I assure you they're well cared for, loved, and happy." "Happy?" Charlotte's laugh was bitter. "Their father is barely cold in his grave, and you've already replaced him. You call that happiness?" "Charlotte, please," Eleanor began. "I know what this is," Charlotte continued. "You were desperate, I understand that. Tom didn't leave you well situated, but to marry the first man who offered shelter, have you no pride, no respect for my brother's memory?" "That's enough." Marcus's voice was quiet but dangerous. "You're welcome here as Eleanor's family, but you will not disrespect her in our home." Our home. Charlotte stood, fury radiating from her. This was supposed to be Tom's home. He wrote me about his plans, about the ranch he would buy once he'd saved enough. Instead, he's dead, and she's living his dream with another man. Eleanor felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. Tom's dreams died with his demon, Charlotte. You didn't see what he became. You didn't watch him gamble away our savings, come home drunk and broken promise to change, only to disappear again. Don't you dare speak ill of him. I'm speaking the truth. I loved Tom, but he was sick, Charlotte. The war broke something in him that couldn't be fixed. So you gave up on him. He gave up on himself. Eleanor's composure finally cracked. He went into that mine shaft, knowing it was unstable, probably hoping. She stopped, unable to voice her suspicion about Tom's death to his sister. The silence that followed was deafening. Henry and William had crept to the stairs, listening with wide, frightened eyes. "Boys," Marcus said gently, "go check on Hope. Make sure she has fresh water." They scampered away, grateful to escape the adult tension. Charlotte sank back into her chair, some of her anger deflating. "He wrote me just before he died, said he'd found a way to make everything right, that you'd have the life you deserved." "Life insurance," Eleanor said quietly. "He mentioned it that morning, but there was nothing, Charlotte. The company said the policy had lapsed for non-payment." "Because he sent the money to me," Charlotte whispered. "I was ill, needed treatment. He sent everything he had said not to tell you because you'd worry." She pulled out a worn envelope. "He enclosed this, said to give it to you if anything happened." Eleanor took the letter with trembling hands. Tom's familiar handwriting blurred through her tears. "My dearest Eleanor," she read aloud. "If you're reading this, then I've failed you one final time. I know what I've become, the shadow of the man you married. The war took pieces of me I can't get back, and I've tried to fill those holes with all the wrong things. You deserve better. The boys deserve better. Find someone who can give you the life I promised but couldn't deliver. Don't mourn me too long. Be happy. That's all I want for you, happiness and peace. All my love, Tom." Charlotte was crying now. "I didn't know. I thought he was getting better. He never told me how bad things were. He was proud," Eleanor said simply. "And he loved you. You were the only family he had left besides us. And now you have a new family," Charlotte said, looking at Marcus with different eyes. "He seems protective of you. He saved Henry's life the night we met, and William's a week later. He's given us a home stability love." "Love," Charlotte studied Eleanor's face. "You love him." Eleanor glanced at Marcus, who was pretending to examine the fireplace. "I'm learning to. It's different from what Tom and I had, but it's real and growing stronger every day." Charlotte stood, smoothing her skirts. "I should go. I've said terrible things." "Stay," Marcus said suddenly. "Please, your family to Eleanor and the boys. Stay for dinner at least. Get to know us, who we really are not, who gossip painted us to be." Charlotte hesitated, then nodded. "I'd like that." The evening that followed was awkward at first, but gradually warmed. The boys, resilient as always, chattered about ranch life, showing their aunt the chess moves Marcus had taught them, the arithmetic Eleanor had them practicing. "Papa's teaching us to ride," William announced proudly. "I can already trot." "Papa." Charlotte looked at Marcus. "They asked," he said simply. "I was honored to accept." After dinner, Charlotte helped Eleanor clear the table while Marcus read to the boys. "He's good with them," Charlotte observed. "Better than good. He's natural patient, everything Tom struggled to be even before the war." "I'm sorry," Charlotte said quietly. "For what I said earlier, I was angry, grieving. I thought you'd forgotten Tom. I'll never forget him, but I can't live in his shadow either. The boys need a future, not just a past. And Marcus gives you that. He gives us possibility," Eleanor corrected. "A chance to build something new." Charlotte left the next morning, but not before pulling Eleanor aside. "Tom would want you happy," she said. "I see that now. And if this man, this life, makes you happy, then you have my blessing. Not that you need it." "I do need it," Eleanor admitted. "You're the boys' only blood family besides me. I want them to know you to have that connection to their father. Then I'll visit again. When the weather's better, maybe I'll even learn to appreciate ranch life." They embraced a bridge rebuilt from the ashes of anger. That Sunday, the Sullivan family attended church in town for the first time. Eleanor had been dreading it, knowing they'd be the subject of scrutiny and gossip. She dressed the boys in their best clothes, tried to tame their increasingly wild hair, and steeled herself for judgment. The church was full when they arrived, conversation stopping as they entered. Marcus walked with confidence, his hand on Eleanor's back, the boys flanking them like small guards. Mr. Sullivan, Reverend Davies, greeted them warmly. "Mrs. Sullivan, so good to see you." And these fine young men, his obvious welcome set a tone. While some congregants remained cool, others approached with genuine warmth. Mrs. Henderson, whose difficult pregnancy Marcus had helped with years ago, embraced Eleanor. "Don't mind the gossips, dear," she whispered. "They've got nothing better to do. Those of us who know Marcus know he deserves happiness." During the service, Reverend Davies spoke about redemption and second chances, about how God worked through unexpected circumstances. Whether intentional or not, his message seemed directed at their situation. Sometimes, he said, God sends storms not to punish, but to redirect, to blow us toward blessings we never would have sought on our own. Eleanor felt Marcus's hand find hers on the pew between them. She squeezed back, drawing strength from his presence. After church, they were invited to several homes for Sunday dinner. Marcus declined politely, but Sheriff McKenna wouldn't take no for an answer. "My Mary's been dying to meet the woman who brought Marcus Sullivan back to life," he insisted. The McKenna home was warm and welcoming. Mary McKenna, a plump woman with graying hair and kind eyes, immediately took to Eleanor. "I've been praying for Marcus since Sarah passed," she confided while they prepared dinner together. "Such a good man shouldn't waste away from grief. Then you appeared like an answer to prayer." "It wasn't quite that simple," Eleanor said. "The best answers never are dear." The men talked ranch business while the boys played with the McKenna grandchildren who were visiting. It was so normal, so domestic, that Eleanor almost forgot their unusual beginning. "Garrett's been quiet," McKenna mentioned to Marcus. "Too quiet. Watch yourself. You think he'll cause more trouble. I think he's a snake, and snakes strike when you least expect it." The warning proved prophetic. 3 days later, Marcus was in town for supplies when Garrett approached him outside the general store. "Enjoying my leftovers." "Sullivan." Garrett's voice was oily with malice. Marcus didn't respond, continuing to load his wagon. "She's quite something, isn't she? So desperate she'd spread her legs for anyone offering shelter." Marcus moved so fast, Garrett didn't see the punch coming. He hit the ground hard, blood streaming from his nose. "You broke my nose," Garrett screamed. "Say another word about my wife, and I'll break more than that," Marcus said calmly. A crowd had gathered, including Judge Harrison, who owed Garrett money. "I'll have you arrested for assault," Garrett sputtered. "I saw Mr. Garrett trip and fall," Mrs. Henderson said loudly. "Clumsy of him." "Me too," added Doc Hartley. "Definitely a fall. Looked like he walked into the wagon to me." Another voice called. Judge Harrison looked around at the united front of townsfolk, then at Garrett bleeding in the dirt. "Seems you fell, Garrett. Best be more careful." Garrett stood, rage twisting his features. "This isn't over, Sullivan. You or that whore you married." Marcus stepped forward again, but Sheriff McKenna appeared, placing a restraining hand on his arm. "Mr. Garrett, you're disturbing the peace. Move along before I arrest you." After Garrett slunk away, McKenna turned to Marcus. "He's going to escalate. Men like him can't stand losing." "Let him try," Marcus said grimly. When Marcus returned home, Eleanor could tell something had happened. That night, after the boys were asleep, he told her about the confrontation. "I'm sorry," Eleanor said. "This is my fault, my past causing problems." "Our past," Marcus corrected. "Garrett was Sarah's brother. This involves both of us." "You defended me." "Of course I did. You're my wife." The simple declaration warmed Eleanor more than any elaborate speech could have. "Marcus, I need to tell you something." He waited patient as always. "I'm starting to— That is my feelings for you are." She struggled for words. "This isn't just gratitude or convenience anymore." "I know," he said softly. "I feel it too. It started that morning with Hope's birth, watching you help seeing your strength. Every day since it's grown stronger. Is it wrong to find love again so soon after loss? Is it wrong for flowers to bloom after winter, for the sun to rise after the darkest night?" Marcus moved closer to her. "Eleanor, I'll never love you the way I loved Sarah that was first love young and untested. But what I feel for you is deeper somehow. Love born from understanding, from choosing each other with full knowledge of what loss means." "A practical love," she teased, echoing their earlier conversation. "No," he said firmly. "A profound love, the kind that builds from respect and partnership into something unshakable." That night, for the first time, they didn't maintain careful distance in their bed. Eleanor curled against Marcus's side, his arm around her, both fully clothed, but intimate in a way that transcended physical closeness. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "Not completely, not the way I might have if we'd met young and unmarked by life, but truly, and growing more each day." "That's enough," Marcus whispered back. "More than enough." The next morning brought unexpected visitors, a wagon train passing through seeking medical help. One of their children had developed a severe fever, and they'd heard there was a veterinarian who treated people. Marcus didn't hesitate gathering his supplies while Eleanor prepared their house to receive the sick child. It was a little girl, perhaps 4, burning with fever, that reminded them all too viscerally of Henry and William's illnesses. "Please," the mother begged. "She's our only child. We've lost 2 others on the trail." Marcus and Eleanor worked through the night, taking shifts fighting the fever with everything they knew. The boys helped by entertaining the other wagon train children, keeping them quiet and occupied. By dawn, the fever broke. The little girl opened her eyes, asked for water in a tiny voice that made everyone cry with relief. "How can we pay you?" the father asked, reaching for his meager purse. "Pass it forward," Marcus said. "Help someone else when they need it." The wagon train stayed another day to let the child recover fully. That evening, they held an impromptu celebration. Someone had a fiddle, another a harmonica. Music filled the ranch for the first time since Sarah and Emma died. "Dance with me," Marcus said suddenly to Eleanor, "here now, in front of everyone. Especially now." They danced in the yard, clumsy and laughing, while the boys clapped and the travelers played. It was the first truly joyful moment that didn't carry the shadow of who they'd lost. "You're beautiful," Marcus said, spinning her awkwardly. "You're a terrible dancer," Eleanor laughed. "But an excellent husband, getting better every day," she agreed. As the wagon train prepared to leave, the mother of the sick child pressed something into Eleanor's hand, a small silver locket. "It was my mother's," she said. "Please take it, so you remember that you saved our daughter." "We saved her together," Eleanor corrected, but accepted the gift. That Sunday at church, Reverend Davies asked Marcus to share their story of helping the wagon train. Standing before the congregation, Marcus spoke simply about community, about how helping others helped heal your own wounds. "My wife and I have both known loss," he said, looking at Eleanor, "but we've learned that the answer isn't to close yourself off, but to open your heart wider, to let community in, to give help and accept it in return." After the service, more people approached them. invitations to dinners, requests for Eleanor to teach some of the town children, suggestions that Marcus officially serve as the area's backup doctor. "We're really part of this place now," Eleanor marveled as they drove home. "We're building something," Marcus agreed. "Not just a family, but a place in this community." That evening, as they tucked the boys in, William asked, "Will we always live here?" "Always," Marcus and Eleanor said together. "Even when we're old," Henry added. "Even then, this is our home, forever." "Good," William said decisively, "because I told everyone at church that we're the Sullivan family, and we're never leaving." As Marcus and Eleanor left the boys' room, they could hear them whispering. "We have the best parents," William said. "The very best," Henry agreed, even if they took a while to find each other. Eleanor leaned against Marcus, tears in her eyes. "They're happy." "We all are," Marcus said, and realized with some surprise that it was true. Despite everything, the losses, the rapid marriage, the challenges, they were happy. The house that had been a tomb when Eleanor arrived was now filled with life. The walls that had echoed with silence now rang with laughter. The family, stitched together from broken pieces, was becoming whole. They were no longer the grieving veterinarian and the desperate widow. They were the Sullivans, a family known for their generosity, their strength, their willingness to help. They were part of the fabric of the community, their unusual beginning already becoming just another frontier story of survival and unexpected grace. As they stood on their porch, watching the sun set over their land, Eleanor thought about Charlotte's visit, about Tom's letter, about the wagon train family, about all the threads weaving together to create their new life. "No regrets?" Marcus asked, sensing her contemplative mood. "None," Eleanor said firmly. "This is exactly where we're supposed to be." March arrived like a lamb, the snow melting into muddy streams that turned the ranch into a swamp. The boys splashed through puddles with wild abandon while Marcus and Eleanor worked to repair winter's damage. They'd settled into their life so completely that the knock on the door at dawn on March 15th felt like a violation of their hard-won peace. Sheriff McKenna stood on their porch, his face grim. Behind him, Judge Harrison waited with papers in his hand, and behind them both Samuel Garrett smirked with vicious satisfaction. "Marcus, Eleanor," McKenna began, his voice heavy with regret. "I'm here on official business." "What's this about?" Marcus demanded, positioning himself between the men and Eleanor. Judge Harrison stepped forward. "Mr. Garrett has presented evidence that Mrs. Sullivan, Mrs. Whitman at the time stole valuable property from his boarding house. Furthermore, he's produced witnesses stating she operated a fraudulent scheme in Missouri before fleeing here." "That's absurd," Eleanor protested. "I have signed affidavits," Garrett said smoothly, producing papers. 3 witnesses saw her take silver candlesticks, cash, and valuable documents from my safe." "What witnesses?" Marcus challenged. "Respectable citizens who owe me, who know me well," Garrett corrected himself quickly, but the slip was telling. "This is revenge," Eleanor said quietly, "because I refused his advances, because I found protection with Marcus." "That's a serious accusation," Judge Harrison said stiffly. "Mr. Garrett is a pillar of our community," McKenna snorted. "Sam Garrett is a snake, and everyone knows it, including you, Harrison." "Nevertheless," the judge continued, "the law requires investigation. Mrs. Sullivan must come with us for questioning." "Over my dead body," Marcus said dangerously. "Papa." Henry's voice came from the stairs. Both boys stood there in their nightshirts, eyes wide with fear. "What's happening?" "Nothing, boys," Eleanor said, forcing calm into her voice. "Just some business to sort out. Go back to bed." "Are they taking you away?" William's voice cracked. The moment of distraction was all Garrett needed. He pulled out another paper. "There's also the matter of custody. These children's father owed me considerable money, as his creditors have rights to his assets." "Children are not assets," Eleanor shouted, Mother Bear fury overtaking her fear. According to this document signed by Tom Whitman, they are collateral for his debts. Marcus examined the paper. This is forged. Tom Whitman died 6 months ago. This is dated 3 months ago. Prove it, Garrett challenged. I can. Charlotte Whitman's voice rang out from behind them. Tom's sister stepped from a carriage that had just arrived, travel-worn but determined. Because 3 months ago, I was handling my brother's estate in Missouri. Every document bore my countersignature as executor. This is fraudulent. Garrett's face flushed. You can't prove. I can and I will. Charlotte produced a leather portfolio. I brought Tom's actual papers, including his real debts, which were paid by the sale of his engineering equipment. Mr. Garrett's name appears nowhere. Those could be forged, Garrett argued desperately. Then let's ask Mr. Coleman, Charlotte said calmly. A second man emerged from the carriage, elderly, distinguished, wearing a judge's robes. Judge Coleman from Missouri. He oversaw Tom's estate proceedings. He was concerned when he heard Mr. Garrett was claiming debts that didn't exist in official records. Judge Harrison paled. Judge Coleman, I wasn't expecting. Clearly not. Coleman said dryly. Now, Harrison, would you like to explain why you're harassing this woman based on obviously fraudulent claims? Or should we discuss the interesting payments from Mr. Garrett to your account that I discovered when investigating this matter? The silence was deafening. Garrett began backing toward his horse, but McKenna moved to block him. Not so fast, Sam. Seems we have fraud, attempted extortion, bribing a judge. McKenna smiled grimly. That's prison time. You can't prove anything, Garrett snarled. Actually, a new voice interrupted. We can. Everyone turned to see Miss Catherine, the schoolteacher, approaching with several other townspeople. She carried a ledger. Mr. Garrett's former bookkeeper came to me last night, she explained. His conscience finally got the better of him. This ledger details every bribe, every forged document, every family Garrett has destroyed with his schemes. Garrett lunged for the ledger, but Marcus caught him, spinning him to the ground with controlled force. That's enough, Samuel. As McKenna hauled Garrett to his feet, the man's composure finally cracked. She should have been mine. He screamed at Eleanor. You were desperate, nothing, nobody. I offered you protection, and you chose him instead. I chose love over ownership. Eleanor said quietly. Partnership over servitude. Love. Garrett laughed bitterly. With a man who is ready to kill himself, who only wanted you because you look like his dead wife. Marcus stepped forward, but Eleanor stopped him with a gentle hand. Yes, love, with a man who chose life over death, who sees me for who I am not, what he can take from me. With a man who saved my children and gave us a home without conditions or cruelty. Take him away, Judge Coleman ordered. Harrison, you'll be coming too. We need to discuss your fitness for the bench. As the group departed, Charlotte lingered. I came as soon as I got Marcus's telegram about Garrett's threats. I couldn't let that man hurt you. You brought a judge from Missouri, Eleanor asked, amazed. He was already investigating Garrett for similar schemes there. Your situation just gave us the final evidence needed. That evening, the ranch felt lighter, as if a shadow had finally lifted. But their relief was short-lived. 3 days later, nature delivered its own crisis. The spring floods came without warning. Snowmelt from an unusually warm day, combined with sudden rain to turn every stream into a raging river. Marcus woke to the sound of cattle bellowing in distress. The lower pasture, he said, jumping from bed. The herd's trapped. They worked through the night, Marcus and Eleanor, wading into freezing water to guide panicked cattle to higher ground. The boys helped by preparing warm food and dry clothes, understanding this was survival, not adventure. The barn's flooding. Eleanor shouted over the roar of water. Hope and her mother were in that barn along with 6 other horses. Without hesitation, Marcus plunged toward the structure, Eleanor right behind him. Eleanor, no, it's too dangerous. We do this together or not at all. They fought through water that rose to their waists, then their chests. The horses were panicking, and Hope was screaming in terror, separated from her mother by the rising flood. "I'll get Celeste," Marcus shouted. "You get Hope." Eleanor had never handled a frightened horse alone, but she thought of her boys, of this filly they all loved, and found strength she didn't know she possessed. She spoke soothingly, the same tone she used for nightmares, and somehow Hope responded, following her through the terrifying water. They saved every animal, but the cost was high. The barn's foundation was undermined, and as they led the last horse out, the structure groaned and partially collapsed. "Our winter feed," Marcus said numbly. "It's all ruined." Half their hay supply, carefully stored for the coming year, was destroyed. Without it, they'd have to sell most of the herd or buy feed at prices that could bankrupt them. "We'll manage," Eleanor said firmly, though she had no idea how. The next days revealed the flood's full devastation. Fences destroyed the vegetable garden Eleanor had planted, washed away the chicken coop, damaged beyond repair. 3 families from town arrived seeking shelter, their homes destroyed completely. "Of course you'll stay," Eleanor said without hesitation, though their own supplies were stretched thin. They converted the remaining barn into temporary housing. Everyone shared what they had: food, clothes, labor. The boys gave up their room to a family with a new baby, sleeping instead by the fire downstairs. "Why are we giving away our food?" William asked one evening, hungry despite Eleanor's efforts to stretch their meals. "Because they have even less," Henry answered before the adults could. "That's what family does. And they're like our big family now." Marcus looked at Eleanor with wonder. He understands. They both do. Children learn what they see, but understanding didn't fill empty bellies or repair destroyed property. Marcus rode to town to seek a loan for rebuilding, only to discover the bank itself had flooded, its records destroyed. Credit was frozen indefinitely. "We could sell some land," Eleanor suggested that night. "It's not enough. Land prices have crashed with everyone trying to sell." Marcus rubbed his face tiredly. "We might have to sell everything. Start over somewhere else." "No," William and Henry said in unison. "This is our home," Henry added firmly. "We're the Sullivan family, and Sullivans don't give up." "Sometimes boys," Marcus began. "You didn't give up when we were sick," William interrupted. "Mama didn't give up in the snow. We don't give up now." Their determination was heartening, but didn't solve practical problems. They had perhaps 2 weeks of food remaining, no money for supplies, and more rain was forecast. Then help arrived from an unexpected source. The wagon train family whose child Marcus and Eleanor had saved sent word to other travelers. Within a week, 3 different wagon trains had stopped at the ranch, each leaving what supplies they could spare: flour, preserved meat, medicine. "Pass it forward," you said, one wagon master explained. Word spreads on the trail. The Sullivan Ranch is known as a place of refuge. Now we're returning the favor. The Methodist Church in Denver, hearing of their plight through Reverend Davies, sent a wagon of supplies and volunteers to help rebuild. Even Mrs. Patterson, the gossipy neighbor, arrived with her husband and sons to help repair fences. "You took in the Hendersons when their house flooded," she said simply, when Eleanor expressed surprise. "Christians help Christians." But it was what happened next that truly saved them. Judge Coleman, before returning to Missouri, had investigated Garrett's other victims. He discovered that Garrett had been systematically stealing from the territory's emergency fund, money meant for disaster relief. "The territory owes you significant compensation," Coleman informed them, "not just for Garrett's harassment, but because funds that should have been available for flood relief were in his stolen hoard." The compensation was enough to rebuild and more, but Marcus and Eleanor agreed immediately it would be shared with everyone affected by the flood. "That's a fortune you're giving away," McKenna pointed out. "We have everything we need," Eleanor replied, watching their boys help neighbors rebuild. "A home, healthy children, each other. The money should go to those who lost everything." The rebuilding took weeks. Everyone worked together, ranchers, townspeople, travelers. The boys learned carpentry from a passing craftsman, helped string new fence wire, and cared for displaced animals. They grew lean and brown and strong, their childhood softness replaced by capable confidence. One evening, exhausted from raising a new barn wall, the community gathered for a shared meal. Someone had brought a fiddle, another a banjo. Music filled the air as people who'd been strangers weeks before danced and laughed together. "Look what you built," Charlotte said to Eleanor. She'd extended her stay to help with the rebuilding. "Not just a ranch, but a community. We didn't build it alone." "No, but you were the catalyst. Your generosity, Marcus's skill, the boys' pure hearts. You showed everyone what's possible when people choose community over isolation." As if to test that community, the threatened second storm arrived that night. But this time, they were ready. Every family had shelter. Every animal was secure. Everyone had supplies. They weathered it together, sharing warmth and stories, fear and hope. In the storm's midst, Eleanor found Marcus standing at the window, watching the rain. "Remembering," she asked gently. "Yes, but differently. That first storm brought death. Sarah and Emma's illness started on a night like this. The second storm brought you. This one," he turned to her, "this one brings perspective, which is that every storm ends. Every loss can lead to something new. Every ending enables a beginning." He pulled her close. "I spent 3 months ready to die because I couldn't see past my grief. Now I can't imagine missing any of this, the struggles, the fear, even the floods, because it's all part of building this life with you." Eleanor kissed him, then not the careful pecks they'd shared before, but something deeper, more passionate. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. "I love you," she said, "completely. Not with the innocent love I gave Tom or the desperate gratitude I felt when you saved us, but with the full love of a woman who's seen your worst and best and chooses all of it." "Eleanor," he began, but she silenced him with another kiss. They were interrupted by giggles. The boys stood in the doorway, hands over their mouths. "Mama and Papa are kissing," William announced unnecessarily. "Properly kissing," Henry added with 6-year-old authority on such matters. "Off to bed, you two," Marcus said, but he was smiling. As the boys scampered away, Eleanor heard Henry tell William, "Now they're really married." "I thought they were already married." "They were, but now they're married in their hearts, too." The storm passed by, mourning, leaving damage, but nothing they couldn't handle together. The flood refugees began returning to their rebuilt homes, each family taking something of the Sullivan spirit with them, the knowledge that generosity creates abundance, that community provides security no amount of money can buy. "We survived," Marcus said, surveying their domain. The ranch was different, some buildings in new locations, fences following altered patterns, but standing strong. "We did more than survive," Eleanor corrected. "We thrived. We turned disaster into opportunity, crisis into community." The boys were right, Marcus reflected. Sullivans don't give up. "No," Eleanor agreed, then added with a smile. "But sometimes Sullivans accept help, share burdens, and build something bigger than themselves." A month later, when the territory held elections for a new judge to replace the disgraced Harrison, the community nominated Marcus. He declined, suggesting instead that they establish a council of elders rotating leadership that prevented the corruption of single authority. "You're building a new world out here," Charlotte observed before finally returning to Missouri. "A place where second chances are real, where community matters more than wealth, where broken people can become whole." "We're building a home," Eleanor corrected. "Everything else follows from that." The night of Charlotte's departure, they held a celebration not for any particular event, but simply for survival, for community, for the unexpected blessings that had emerged from crisis. The entire territory seemed to attend, bringing food, music, and stories. Marcus stood to speak, raising his glass of cider. 8 months ago, I was alone in this house, ready to end everything. Then a storm brought a desperate woman and 2 sick boys to my door. I thought I was saving them, but they saved me. Every person here has a similar story, a moment when disaster became opportunity, when strangers became family. To the storms that bring us together, someone called out. To the Sullivans who remind us what together means, another added. To second chances, Eleanor said softly, but her words carried. To second chances, the crowd echoed, and the toast rang across the ranch, across the valley, into the mountains where new storms were always brewing, but where people now knew they'd face them together. As the celebration continued around them, Marcus and Eleanor stood apart for a moment, watching their boys dance with other children, seeing their community celebrate on land that had nearly been lost, witnessing the triumph of hope over despair. No regrets? Marcus asked their traditional question. One, Eleanor admitted. He looked at her in concern. I wish we'd had more time. With Sarah and Emma. With Tom before he broke. With each other. I wish we'd found each other sooner. But then we wouldn't be who we are, Marcus pointed out. Our losses shaped us into people who could build this. Eleanor considered this. Then no regrets, only gratitude for what was, what is, and what's still to come. Thunder rumbled in the distance, another storm approaching. But this time, instead of fear, Eleanor felt only readiness. They'd weathered worse. They'd weather this. Together, their community, their family, their home, all built from the ashes of loss into something unbreakable. The boys ran to them as the first raindrops fell. Storm coming, Papa, William announced. We're ready, Henry added confidently. Yes, Marcus said, gathering his family close as the rain began. We absolutely are. Summer arrived with a gentleness that felt like nature's apology for the brutal spring. The ranch had been transformed by their community rebuilding, not just restored, but improved. Where single fences had stood, double reinforcements now protected the pastures. The new barn was built on higher ground, with stone foundations that could withstand any flood. Most remarkably, a small schoolhouse had been erected at the ranch's eastern edge, where Eleanor now taught 15 children from surrounding homesteads. Mama, do we have to call you Mrs. Sullivan at school? William complained one morning as they walked to the schoolhouse together. Yes, Eleanor said firmly. At school, I'm your teacher first. But everyone knows you're our mama, Henry pointed out with irrefutable 6-year-old logic. And they know Papa is our Papa, but we still call him Mr. Sullivan when he comes to teach animal husbandry. Eleanor reminded them. Marcus had begun weekly lessons for the older children, teaching them practical veterinary skills that could save livestock and livelihoods. It had been Judge Coleman's suggestion before he left education that matched frontier needs. That afternoon, as Eleanor dismissed her students, she noticed a familiar figure on horseback approaching. Her blood chilled before she realized it wasn't Garrett he was serving 5 years in territorial prison. This was someone else entirely, someone she'd never expected to see again. Eleanor. The man dismounted his face, older, weathered, but unmistakably familiar. Eleanor, is it really you? James. Tom's brother, the one who disappeared after the war, presumed dead. How we thought you were dead. I know. I almost was. James Whitman removed his hat, revealing a terrible scar across his scalp. Took me 3 years to remember my own name, another 2 to find my way back to civilization. The boys who'd been playing nearby approached cautiously. Henry William. James's voice broke. My God, they looked just like Tom at that age. Boys, this is your Uncle James, Eleanor managed. Your father's older brother. Papa's inside, William said, then caught himself. I mean Mr. Marcus, our new papa. James's expression shifted through several emotions. You remarried. Tom died 7 months ago, Eleanor said quietly. A mining accident. I know. That's why I'm here. I've been tracking you since I heard. He pulled out a leather pouch heavy with coins. Tom wrote to me during the war, asked me to look after you if anything happened. I couldn't then, but I can now. James, that's not necessary. Please, let me do this one thing for my brother. He looked at the boys again, his eyes wet. They're all that's left of our family. Marcus emerged from the barn, immediately assessing the situation with the instincts of someone who'd faced threats before. But Eleanor's posture told him this wasn't danger, just complicated history. Marcus, this is James Whitman, Tom's brother. The men measured each other, James seeing the man who'd replaced his brother Marcus, seeing a potential disruption to their hard-won peace. Mr. Sullivan, James extended his hand. I hear you saved my nephew's lives. Eleanor saved them. I just provided shelter. Papa saved us from the fever, Henry corrected, and from the bad man, and from the flood. Sounds like more than just shelter, James observed. They invited James for supper, an awkward meal where past and present collided. James told stories of Tom before the war, bright, ambitious, full of dreams. The boys listened hungrily, eager for glimpses of the father they barely remembered. He was brilliant with mathematics, James recalled. Could calculate anything in his head. I see you inherited that, Henry. Papa Marcus taught me multiplication, Henry said proudly. We use it for calculating feed costs. James flinched slightly at Papa Marcus, but continued. And Tom loved to build things, always constructing something. You have those hands, William. I helped build the new chicken coop, William announced. Papa said I'm a natural with hammers. As the evening progressed, James's discomfort grew more visible. After the boys went to bed, he finally spoke his mind. You moved on quickly. Eleanor's spine stiffened. I did what I had to do to survive. With Tom barely cold. Tom was cold long before he died, Marcus interrupted quietly. From what Eleanor's told me, the war took the man you knew. What was left was someone struggling with demons that eventually won. You didn't know him? No. But I know what grief and guilt can do to a man. I know what it's like to lose yourself in darkness. And I know Eleanor and those boys deserved better than memory. They deserved life. James stood abruptly. I should go. Stay, Eleanor said. Please. The boys need to know their father's family. You're welcome here. In the house where another man has replaced my brother. In the house where your brother's children are loved, safe, and happy. Eleanor corrected. Where they're growing into good men. Where they have a future Tom couldn't give them. James stayed for 3 days watching the family's rhythms. He saw Marcus teaching the boys to ride patient with their mistakes. He saw Eleanor managing the household while teaching a full school day, never complaining. He saw the boys themselves happy, healthy, calling Marcus Papa, as naturally as breathing. On his last morning, he found Marcus in the barn tending to a cow with an infected hoof. You love them, James said. It wasn't a question. With everything I have, even knowing they're another man's sons. Marcus looked up from his work. They're my sons, not by blood, but by choice, which might be stronger. I chose them. They chose me. We choose each other every day. Tom was my brother. And he's gone. The question is, do you want to be part of your nephew's lives going forward, or do you want to stay locked in the past? James was quiet for a long moment. Tom wrote me once near the end. Said he was failing Eleanor, failing the boys. Said if anything happened to him, he hoped they'd find someone better. I'm not better. I'm just here, present, committed. James extended his hand. Take care of them. Always. Before leaving, James gave the money pouch to Eleanor. For the boys' education, Tom would want that. Thank you, James. Will you visit again? Maybe, when it hurts less to see another man living the life Tom should have had. After James left, a strange melancholy settled over the house. The boys were quieter, processing the stories of their biological father. Eleanor found herself examining old memories, wondering if she'd moved on too quickly. Marcus withdrew slightly, perhaps questioning his place in this family he'd claimed. It was Henry who broke the spell. At dinner he announced, "Uncle James was nice, but I'm glad Papa Marcus is our papa." "Why?" Eleanor asked gently. "Because Papa Marcus is here. Our first papa loved us, but he left. Papa Marcus stays. Always," William added firmly. He promised. That night, as Marcus and Eleanor prepared for bed, she said, "James's visit unsettled you. It reminded me that I'm not their real father." Eleanor turned to face him fully. "Real is what you make it. You've taught them, protected them, loved them. You've given them stability Tom never could. That's as real as any blood connection. But they deserve to know their history. They do. And they will. But their future is with you." She took his hands. "With us. The family we've built from broken pieces." Marcus pulled her close, and for the first time since their wedding night, their embrace led to more. They came together with the tenderness of people who understood loss and the fierce joy of those who'd found love again. It was a claiming, not desperate or passionate, but deep and certain. A promise made with bodies as well as words. Afterward, as they lay entwined, Eleanor said, "I want more children." Marcus stilled. "Eleanor, I know the risks. I know we both have ghosts, but I want to create new life with you, children who are ours from the beginning. The boys would love siblings. They've already asked when we're giving them a baby sister." Marcus laughed softly. "They have multiple times. William has offered to teach a baby everything he knows about chickens." "That's a terrifying prospect." They laughed together. Then Marcus grew serious. "If we're blessed with children, yes. But if not, what we have is already more than I ever hoped for." As if nature was listening, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant 6 weeks later. The announcement sent the boys into ecstatic celebration. "I'm going to be the best big brother," William declared. "We're both going to be big brothers," Henry corrected. "Together." The pregnancy progressed through autumn, the family adjusting to the prospect of new life. The community, having fully embraced the Sullivans, showered them with gifts, hand-sewn blankets, carved toys, promises of help when the baby arrived. In November, exactly 1 year after Eleanor had knocked on Marcus's door, Charlotte arrived for an extended visit. She'd been corresponding regularly, her initial disapproval long since transformed into genuine affection for Marcus. "You're glowing," she told Eleanor. "I'm enormous," Eleanor corrected, rubbing her swollen belly. "You're happy, truly happy." "I am. It feels almost wrong being this happy after so much loss." "It's not wrong. It's life insisting on itself. Tom would be glad." That evening, as snow began to fall, the first of the season, Eleanor felt the initial pains of labor. Marcus immediately went into controlled action, sending Henry to fetch Mrs. Henderson, the midwife, while William was tasked with keeping the fire high and water boiling. "It's too early," Eleanor gasped between contractions. "Only by 2 weeks. The baby will be fine," Marcus assured her, though his own fear was carefully hidden. The labor was long, but uncomplicated. Marcus stayed by Eleanor's side throughout, letting her crush his hand during contractions, whispering encouragement when she flagged. The boys waited anxiously downstairs, with Charlotte occasionally calling up questions that made everyone laugh, despite the circumstances. "Is the baby here yet? Is Mama okay? Can we name it Thunder if it's a boy?" As dawn broke on November 15th, exactly 1 year since their first meeting, a new cry filled the house. Not the cry of fever or fear or loss, but the fierce, healthy wail of new life. "It's a girl," Mrs. Henderson announced, placing the baby in Eleanor's exhausted arms. Marcus stared at his daughter with wonder. She had Eleanor's nose, his dark hair, and her own fierce spirit evident in her loud protests at being born. "She's perfect," he whispered. "Can we come up?" Henry called. "Come meet your sister," Eleanor called back. The boys crept in cautiously, eyes wide with awe. "She's so small," William breathed. "You were that small once," Eleanor told him. "What's her name?" Henry asked. Marcus and Eleanor exchanged glances. They'd discussed many names but hadn't decided. "Grace," Eleanor said suddenly. "Grace Hope Sullivan." "Hope like the horse?" William asked excitedly. "Hope like the future," Marcus corrected. "Grace like the unexpected gifts that save us." As the family gathered around the newest member, Charlotte watching from the doorway, with tears streaming down her face, the circle felt complete. Not perfect perfection didn't exist in lives marked by loss, but whole in a way none of them had imagined possible. "1 year ago," Marcus said softly, "I was ready to die. Now." He looked at his wife, his sons, his daughter. "Now I can't imagine missing a single moment of this." "Miracles come in storms sometimes," Eleanor said, remembering that first terrible night. And in the quiet moments after, Marcus added, kissing Grace's tiny forehead. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside the Sullivan house, warmth and love created their own climate. The family that had formed from desperation and proximity had become something unshakable, a testament to the possibility of second chances, third chances, as many chances as it took to get life right. "Papa," Henry said thoughtfully, "our family is kind of like a quilt, isn't it? All different pieces sewn together to make something warm." Marcus ruffled his hair. "That's exactly what we are, son. A patchwork family, but stronger for all our seams." "I like being a patchwork," William decided. "It's more interesting than being all one thing." As Grace settled into sleep, her tiny hand wrapped around Marcus's finger, Eleanor felt the last of her old life's shadows fade. This was her family, complete and complicated and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. The storm that had brought them together had passed, but its gifts remained: love from loss, hope from despair, and a future bright with possibility. They were the Sullivans, and their story was just beginning. 5 years had passed since that November morning when Grace Hope Sullivan announced her arrival to the world. The ranch had grown into something neither Marcus nor Eleanor could have imagined, not just in size, though they'd acquired 2 neighboring properties from families moving further west, but in significance. The Sullivan Ranch had become the heart of the territory, a place where travelers found refuge, where neighbors gathered for celebrations and crises alike, where broken people discovered they could heal. This Christmas Eve afternoon, Eleanor stood in the kitchen she'd once entered as a desperate stranger, now preparing food for 50 expected guests. Grace, 5 years old, with her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes, stood on a stool beside her, carefully placing cookies on plates with the concentration of a master artist. "Mama, why do we have so many people for Christmas?" Grace asked. "Because family isn't just blood, sweetheart. It's the people who show up when you need them." "Like how you showed up when Papa needed you." Eleanor smiled, smoothing her daughter's hair. "Exactly like that." Through the window, she could see Marcus in the field with the boys, though at 11, Henry and William hardly qualified as boys anymore. They were teaching the younger children from town how to ride their patients, mimicking Marcus's own teaching style. Henry had grown tall and thoughtful, already showing signs of the doctor he'd announced he wanted to become. William remained shorter but stockier, with hands that could gentle any animal and build anything from scraps. "They're good teachers," Charlotte observed, entering the kitchen with an armload of evergreen boughs. She'd moved to the territory permanently 3 years ago, opening a small school in town that complemented Eleanor's ranch classroom. "They learn from the best," Eleanor replied, watching Marcus demonstrate something with his hands, making all the children laugh. The house had been expanded twice, once to accommodate Grace again, when Eleanor delivered twins 2 years later. The boys, Marcus Jr. and Thomas, named for both fathers, honoring past, while building future, were currently napping upstairs, worn out from morning adventures. "Eleanor," A voice called from the doorway. Judge Coleman entered older now, but still commanding. He'd become a regular visitor drawn by what he called the Sullivan experiment in community building. Judge, welcome you made it despite the snow. Wouldn't miss it. I have news from Denver. The territorial government has approved funding for your medical clinic proposal. Eleanor gasped. It had been Marcus's dream, a proper medical facility at the ranch where he could train others in both veterinary and human medicine, breaking down the artificial barriers between the two in frontier life. Don't tell Marcus yet, Eleanor begged. It's his Christmas gift. Your secret's safe, though I think his gift to you might compete. Before Eleanor could ask what he meant, commotion erupted outside. The afternoon stage had arrived unusual for Christmas Eve. She watched Marcus help someone down, a well-dressed woman with graying hair and a familiar bearing. "Oh, my lord," Eleanor breathed. "It's my mother." She hadn't seen her mother in 7 years, not since before Tom's death. They'd corresponded, but her mother had been caring for Eleanor's ailing father, unable to travel. Eleanor, her mother Margaret, embraced her at the door, both women crying. "Your husband wrote me. Said it was time for family to be together. Sent tickets arrangements, everything." Marcus did this. "That wonderful man said you'd built something here that I needed to see, that my grandchildren needed their grandmother." Margaret pulled back, examining Eleanor's face. "You're happy, truly happy." "I am, Mama. Happier than I knew was possible." The reunion was joyful chaos, boys showing off their ranch skills, Grace immediately claiming her grandmother as her special person, the twins toddling over to investigate this new arrival. Margaret took it all in with wonder. 7 grandchildren, she marveled. The count included the Henderson children whom the Sullivans had taken in 2 years prior when their parents died of typhoid. And this place, it's like a small town unto itself. As evening fell, guests began arriving. The house filled with neighbors' friends, the extended family of choice they'd built. Sheriff McKenna and his wife, the Hendersons, Miss Catherine, with her new husband, even Mrs. Patterson, who'd become Eleanor's closest female friend, despite their rocky beginning. Reverend Davies called for attention. "Before we feast, I think we need to hear from our hosts. Marcus, Eleanor, 5 years ago, you found each other in a storm. What you've built since then has blessed us all. Would you share a word?" Marcus and Eleanor stood together, their children arranged around them like steps. The 11-year-old twins, 9-year-old Henderson boys, 5-year-old Grace, the 2-year-old twins in their arms. "5 years ago," Marcus began, "I thought my life was over. I had lost everything that mattered. Then a desperate woman with 2 sick boys knocked on my door, and everything changed." "I was that desperate woman," Eleanor continued, "ready to trade our last possession, a hen, for a night's shelter. Instead, I found a home, a partner, a future I couldn't have imagined." "We've all been desperate," Marcus said, looking around the room. "Every person here has faced storms, literal and metaphorical, but we've learned that storms don't just destroy, they also clear ground for new growth. This ranch," Eleanor added, "isn't special because of the land or the buildings. It's special because it's become a place where second chances are real, where broken people help each other heal, where community means no one faces their storms alone. To the storms that bring us together." Someone called out the same toast from years ago. "To the Sullivans who remind us what together means," another added. "To family both born and chosen," Margaret contributed, raising her glass. As the celebration continued, Eleanor found a moment of quiet on the porch with Marcus. Snow was falling gently, unlike the violent storm of their beginning. "Your mother was the perfect gift," she told him. "Wait until you see what the boys and I built in the new barn," he replied with a mysterious smile. Later, he led her out to reveal a complete medical clinic, examination tables, surgical tools, medicine cabinets, everything needed for the training program they'd dreamed of. "How did you—" "The whole community contributed. Everyone gave what they could. McKenna organized it, said it was time we gave back to the family that's given us so much. Eleanor kissed him deeply, not caring who might see. We've come so far from that first night, when you tried to trade a hen for shelter, when you chose life over death. They stood together, watching through the barn windows as their community celebrated in their house. Children played, adults laughed, stories were shared. The Henderson boys were teaching Grace a card game, while Henry helped serve dessert, and William entertained the younger children with tales of ranch adventures. "Do you ever think about them?" Eleanor asked quietly. "Sarah and Emma Tom. Every day, but differently now. Not with the sharp grief that cuts, but with gratitude for the time we had, for the lessons they taught, for the space their absence created for this. Is it wrong that I'm grateful too, even for the pain? No. The pain shaped us into people who could build this. Without loss, we couldn't fully appreciate what we've gained." Grace ran out to them, bundled in her coat. "Mama, Papa, Grandma says to come inside. It's time for the story." "What story?" Marcus asked, scooping her up. "The story of us. How we all became a family." They returned to find the household gathered around the fireplace. Charlotte had started the tale, the storm, the desperate knock, the sick children. Others added their pieces, the first wedding, the flood, the trials with Garrett, the arrival of each child. And then Grace was born, William said proudly. And she was the loudest baby ever. "Was not," Grace protested. "Were too, you scared the horses." As the story wound to the present, Henry spoke up, his voice deeper than it had been even months ago. "The best part is it's not ending. Our family keeps growing. Our community keeps building. Every storm brings new people who need what we have." "And what do we have?" Marcus prompted. "Hope," said William. "Love," added Henry. "Cookies," shouted Grace, making everyone laugh. "Each other," Eleanor concluded. "We have each other." Later, after guests had departed or found beds in the various buildings, after children were asleep and the house was quiet, Marcus and Eleanor sat by their bedroom window, watching the snow fall. "If you could go back," Marcus asked, "change anything, would you?" Eleanor considered. "I'd save Tom if I could. Give him peace instead of torment. Save Sarah and Emma, give you that life you'd planned. But then, I know, we wouldn't have this. The children wouldn't exist. This community wouldn't have formed." She sighed. "I suppose that's the message, isn't it? That our greatest tragedies can become our greatest blessings, but only if we're brave enough to rebuild. To knock on a stranger's door in a storm. To open that door despite your own pain." They were quiet for a moment. Then Eleanor spoke again. "Margaret was wrong, you know." "About what?" "When she said my boys were worth more than gold. They weren't worth more. They were worth exactly what they brought. The chance for a man to remember he wanted to live. The beginning of something neither of us could have imagined." "A family." "A universe," Eleanor corrected. "Look what we've built, Marcus. Not just a family, but a whole world where love is the currency and everyone is wealthy." Marcus pulled her close. From a hen to an empire. The hen was just the excuse. Grace was right. It was really about the storm bringing us together. Then thank God for storms, and for the courage to survive them. As they prepared for bed, Eleanor paused at the window one more time. In the barn, Hope, now a full-grown mare, stood with her own foal. The metaphor was almost too perfect, the creature named for their future, now creating futures of her own. "Tell me," Eleanor said, "after all we've built, all we've survived, all we've become, was it worth it? The pain that brought us here." Marcus joined her at the window, his arms encircling her, their reflection in the glass showing a couple aged by experience, but softened by love. "Every moment of pain," he said firmly, "was worth this, worth you, worth them. Worth the knowledge that life insists on itself, that love grows in the most unlikely ground, that families form in the most unexpected ways." Then we're living our message, Eleanor said. That second chances are real. That broken doesn't mean worthless. That sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the worst storms. And that a desperate woman with a hen and 2 sick boys, and a broken man ready to give up, can build something extraordinary if they're brave enough to try. Outside, the snow continued falling, but inside the Sullivan house, warmth and love had created their own permanent climate. The family that had begun in desperation had become a beacon of hope for everyone who'd lost their way. Tomorrow would bring Christmas morning children's laughter community gathering. There would be challenges ahead, there always were. But tonight, in this moment, everything was perfect in its beautiful imperfection. The woman who'd tried to trade a hen for shelter had found a kingdom. The man who'd planned to die had found infinite reasons to live. And together, they'd proven that love wasn't just worth more than gold. It was the only currency that truly mattered.